There's a lot of background noise.
Huh?
Welcome back, everyone, to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 127, Geopolitics. I'm here with my co-facilitator, I know.
Hello, everyone. How y'all doing today? How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good, brother. Yourself?
I am well. Thanks for asking.
All right. For those of you who want to follow along, there's a docket in the description beneath the video. Please hit the like button as you come in, and we will get started. All right, this first article is from TheGuardian.com. Maduro starts new Venezuela term by accusing U.S. of imperialist world war. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has castigated the European Union and accused Washington of waging an imperialist world war against his crisis-stricken nation as he shrugged off a tempest of international condemnation to begin his second term in office. Maduro, who inherited Hugo Chávez's Bolivarian revolution after his 2013 death, has overseen a calamitous decline in his country's fortunes and was reelected in disputed elections last May. A shower of domestic and international censor met the 56-year-old swearing in at the Supreme Court in Caracas on Thursday. The United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo condemned Maduro's quote illegitimate usurpation of power and vowed to quote use the full weight of the U.S. economic and diplomatic power to press for a restoration of Venezuelan democracy. The European Union called last year's vote, quote, neither free nor fair, and said Maduro was starting a new mandate on basis of non-democratic elections. Latin American governments also denounced the inauguration, with Paraguay breaking off diplomatic ties and Argentina's president Marcio Marci branding Maduro the quote victimizer who plays victim. Venezuela is living under a dictatorship, Marci tweeted. Maduro defined those attacks during a feisty 80-minute address to fellow Chavistas and international leftist allies, including the Nicaraguan president Daniel Ortega, Bolivia's Evo Morales, and Cuba's Miguel Diaz-Canel. So, I don't know if you read this. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I read it. Again, we all know what Venezuela is going through. From what I can tell from this, he's pushing back on all of the outside pressure. Different governments, especially in Latin America. You have Jair Bolsonaro. I think that's the new Brazilian president. He's right wing. He's putting pressure on Venezuela and other small Latin American countries applying pressure on Venezuela. As far as outside pressure, of course, you got the United States and Europe. He's pushing back by saying, hey, they're waging this economic and like a social opinionated war against him and his establishment that's hurting his country. That's what I get from it when I read the article.
What's going on, Preem?
What's going on, Preem?
What's up, man?
Nothing much, brother. Do you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, it's really starting to suck for this guy. Not starting, it's been sucking for him, man. he's got one foot out the door, whether he knows it or not. He's pretty much backed himself into a corner. His comrades around there in the region, they're not feeling him too tough. I mean, he had some here or there, but just from like that dude in Brazil, he's not feeling them. I know Colombia's got problems because their people, Venezuelan people, are leaking over there, causing problems over there, and the state of what's going on there. Where in regards to the blame game, where the blame game goes, it's a humanitarian crisis, and somebody, he's got to go. I think this past week somebody said they recognized this one young kid or somebody else as the actual president, or as a true leader or president of Venezuela. So he just needs to do things the right way and just step down, just do it peacefully. But I mean, he's out of there. He's done. He's toast. Yeah. Good riddance.
Yeah, it's hard to be on the side when you actually have 2.5 million Venezuelans going into Colombia and Guyana, even northern Brazil, that are fleeing Venezuela because of the inflation. It's hard for them to eating out of trash. It's even hard for civil servants to feed their family. It's hard to say, okay, I understand you got this petrol, it's backed by diamonds, gold, oil, your country's resources. That's, to us, that's a step in that's a step in a good. It's hard to say, okay, lay off the gas when your citizens can't even eat. So it's a really bad look.
Yeah, and another thing about Latin people is, although they have their own countries and they have their own, their cultures and their quasi nationalists. I mean, when they see suffering among other Latin people, I mean, there comes a certain point in time to where they're like, listen, we all got to get together and do something about this, and that's what's happening, and the voices are rising. And just the people in the West, whatever, they're kind of, the smart move for them is just to fall back and let Latin America deal with it as a Latin American problem, because they will. Because at the end of the day, they will. Even though Venezuela is its own country, I mean, the people are really, really suffering, and they're doing all the best they can to help the ones that are kind of fleeing across the borders. But at a certain point in time, they're going to start crying to the political leaders like, "Hey, man, you guys have the power, you guys have the military, you guys have something. I mean, you guys do something about this. Our people are dying over here, and they will.
So it's important for people to understand what's really going on the ground. The United States has sanctions on it, as well as the European Union. And what the sanctions do is it sends the currency into a spiral. And then it blocks important medicines that people need on the ground and in other services. Now, when you have a socialist government in place, it can't be interfered with, or else it's because it's completely fragile. I would say that capitalism is somewhat fragile in that same sense, which is why you had Occupy Wall Street. The thing is, the system worked fine until somebody started interfering with it. And once you put sanctions on the country and you spiral their currency out of control, then it's out of their sphere of influence. So it doesn't matter if Maduro steps down or he stays in power. The problem is coming from the outside and not from the inside. Now, what they have done is they've taken back a lot of their state-run resources, such as the oil and some of their other energy companies, such as Citgo. Citgo is a Venezuelan brand. The United States has put all types of measures in place to actually disrupt that part of the economy, which sends the currency into a spiral, which also then forces everybody to start selling things on the ground in order to create capital flight. So they take the goods off of the shelves, your milk, eggs, and your other staples, and then they sell it in places like Colombia for U.S. dollars in order to get their money out of the country. If that makes any sense to you, Preem.
So what's there again? At the end of the day, aside from the blame game, what's their master plan? There is no plan to make this end. The guy is inept. The country is incapable of coming up with a plan to bring this to a stop as long as he's there.
Because he's not the problem.
Okay, so then, but he still has to go. If he can't fix it, then why? And if he leaving is not going to go ahead and stop it, then why is everybody telling him to go ahead and step down and leave?
Because they have what they call right-wing governments around in these countries. The new Brazilian president is a right-wing government. The new president inside Colombia is a right-wing government. The new president in Argentina is a right-wing government. Those are either former military or other state agency assets. So they want him to leave so that they can plunder the resources inside Venezuela, which is what happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, or even going back to the 40s. So when Chavez came into power, he took back all those agents, all those state-run resources, those companies, and brought it back to the state, and which is what brought the state back into power financially. Now, once Chavez died, they tried to go back in there and plunder, they being the external governments. The Colombian gangsters were the actual guys who were siphoning resources outside of Venezuela.
So now, if the big thing, if the thing is, okay, the reason all this is happening, the socialist system works, the reason why it's gone to shit now is because of U.S. interference, into it, then that means one, it was a fragile system. So if the U.S. stops, or if the thinking is if the U.S. stops, then the country is going to go back to being right. The country is going to get well again. But the U.S. is not going to stop as long as this guy is there. So either way, in order for this thing to stop, we take the ideology, we take all that stuff out of the way. This human rights catastrophe has to stop. And the only way that it can stop is if he leaves. That's the only chance. There's no way anything is going to stop or slow down as long as he's there. He's got to go. He's got to leave.
Even if he does leave, that doesn't solve the problem. The problem is that it's coming from external powers. If you make him leave, the country's going to go into chaos, and it'll look just like the Ukraine. It'll look just like Libya, where you have warring factions, and it'll be 10 times worse. So that's what they're trying to protect. That's why they want to keep him in power. The people on the ground there want to keep him in power. Now,
so it's going to be 10 times worse than what it is right now.
Absolutely. You have all types of people breaking into different corners where they'll take up arms against each other, and the country will be in chaos. The country's mild now compared to what it would be if he wasn't there.
And we know this how?
Because that's what's happened in the past.
Okay, so but then in the past when he wasn't there, things were fine, right?
No, it was actually run like a dictatorship, which is what they were trying to prevent. That's what brought Chavez to power in 1999. So when he came into power in 2001, between 2000 and 2005, he lifted 5 million Venezuelans out of poverty through his own socialist program. So when you say that these guys should leave, those guys leaving would send the country into chaos.
Okay, but then what's the alternative?
The alternative is for the United States and the European Union and the surrounding countries to stop meddling inside the affairs.
And if that right there is the actual problem, is the actual root of the problem, have they been given an ultimatum to be told, okay, we will stop this if you do that?
Say that one more time.
Has Venezuela been given an ultimatum by the West, the United States, or Europe that says, hey, okay, if we are the root cause of all your problems over there, we will stop this if you guys just do X?
Yeah, that's what Maduro. If you read the article, that's pretty much what Maduro is saying.
No, I'm saying have the U.S. given him an ultimatum that says, okay, we will stop all of these sanctions if you just do X?
Yes, if you leave. But why would he leave?
Okay. Okay, so that the people can stop suffering, they can lift the sanctions.
But then that goes against their sovereignty. They're no longer a sovereign state. Now you're talking about they're basically a commonwealth of the United States, like Puerto Rico would be.
Okay. Then you know what? Then the only thing that's going to happen is just ride this out. Just ride it out as best as it possibly can.
What you're saying is, if Europe and America put sanctions on any country, and it sends it to chaos, and to stop the chaos, that president has to leave. That's what you're saying, right?
Listen, I mean,
are you asking me or are you asking Preem?
Preem.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, this is the thing. Whether it's sanctions, whether it's a bombing, whether it's an invasion, whether it's an attack, if you were given an ultimatum that says, "Hey, listen, we will chill out, we will stop all this shit if you sign on this line and you agree to an X." Now you have a choice. You either do it or you don't do it.
But isn't that bullying and basically taking over the world?
Look. I mean, I'm not going to get into the reason behind why they went ahead and did it, but again, you have a choice. Okay, so if their choice is we're not going to sign on this bottom line, I'm not gonna go ahead and step down. They just be willing to deal with the consequences and cry me a river in the meantime.
But that don't make sense, though.
But I mean, that's the those are their options.
But that at the same time could be any country's option.
Okay, but what are they going to do? What choice do they have? I mean, they do have choices. Again, ride it out or sign on a dotted line.
And you're
so you're essentially advising a country to give up their sovereignty in order to move forward.
I'm just saying, as long as they know, I mean, actions have consequences. If they go ahead and sign on the dotted line, those actions will have consequences. You may not like those consequences, but you know, maybe those consequences may be better for the people there. If they don't sign on a dotted line, the people may not like those consequences, but for national sovereignty and the people who are for national sovereignty, they may like those consequences of, you know, holding strong, staying in the line and not signing on the dotted line. But they have two choices to make. And this thing is going to get worse and worse and worse.
Okay, so should Iran and Cuba and these other countries, America and Europe, have sanctions on? Should they do the same thing?
Listen, I mean, right now we're talking about Venezuela and the problem, the issue that's going on in Venezuela and with the Venezuelan people right there. Okay, it's going from bad to worse, and the situation is continuing to get worse and worse and worse. Okay, at a certain point in time, do you care? At a certain point in time, is this about ego and pride, or is this about the people?
It's not about ego and pride. It's about keeping your country intact.
Okay,
and start having powers come in and take your resources.
Okay, cool.
And not having your people be benefit from your natural resources.
Cool.
That's what
Write it out. Cool. Write it out. Write it out.
Preem, I think they can write it out, which is why they're holding on. I think they're looking at North Korea as an example of holding on, despite the fact that they're isolated, that they actually can survive, right? If you look at Cuba as an island has been isolated for 65 years, and they are not as modern as the United States, obviously, but they've actually survived pretty long, and they've been actually able to develop an industrial complex of medicine. So they've been able to stand the tide. So when you say that there's a crisis down there, it's not as bad as the United States.
Of course not. Of course not. And everybody knows that North Korea is one of the top tourist destinations. You can ask Otto Warburg about that. But if that's where they want to end up being or be like, if that's the model, God bless them.
No, I'm not saying that that's the model that they want to run, but I'm saying that's the only alternative that they do have is to be isolated. But if the United States is openly interfering in the elections of another country, but wants to blame Russia for meddling in their their elections. There's a bit of hypocrisy coming from them politically about their position on Venezuela.
Well, hey, you know what I'm saying? I mean, this whole game of people interfering, having spies, CIA, killing off people, assassination, this shit has been going on for over 100 years. It's just the way that the game is played. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it wrong. But I just try not to put any emotions or feelings in the thing and try to be pragmatic about things. Everything isn't gonna be, symbolically or ethically the way that we want it or would like it to be. Sometimes things just are the way it is, and some fuck shit happens. So not to say that this didn't happen to this country, but at a certain point in time, take the L, fall back, and come back and rebuild slowly.
There is no coming back if they
or don't.
That wouldn't happen, which is what we're trying to get you to understand. Or at least I'm trying to get you to understand. If they surrender to the United States, what's going to happen is they're going to plunder all the state resources like they did to Russia in the 1990s under Clinton. When the Soviet Union collapsed and George Bush was leaving out of power, the Clinton administration, when they won, in 93, they took office in 93, the first thing they did is they went right into Russia and started plundering all the resources inside of Russia. All of their military and industrial complexes inside the country were ravaged by United States politicians, diplomats, everything you could think of. Everybody in the United States had some form of hand in the plummeting of resources and salvaging of resources out of Russia. And that's what brought Putin to power. That's what brought Putin to power in 1999. So if you
again, let him just write it out. I will absolutely be here to see how this story ends. And it won't be pretty. It won't be pretty if they write it out. It won't be pretty.
A lot of people are like bashing Maduro, but don't understand that Maduro inherited this. He didn't build this. He inherited it. This was built long before he even got into politics. He was still like a bus driver, if I remember correctly, or a shuttle driver when all this was even happening. He's only 56. He's only been in power the last 6 years. Prior to that, he was in his 40s or in his 30s. He had nothing to do with any of the problems that's going on. So when people bash him and say, "Well, he's inept," he's not as charismatic as Chavez was, because that's not his thing. That's not where he came from. But when you take into consideration that what he inherited something that's been tainted, and he has
again, really quick. There is no solution in sight for them. No, there isn't. There is. I mean, again, they can be stubborn and hard-headed about this, but I don't look at this from a game of Dungeons and Dragons or Cloak and Dagger. I look at it from the position of what's happening to the people on the ground, and watching those stories, seeing those documentaries, what's happening to the people. At a certain point in time, you just, again, if it means taking the L, take the L, but the people are hurting, the people are suffering. Something has to be done for the people. Forget about the pride, forget about the stances, forget about the nation. Listen, you got to stop the suffering of the people. Something has to be done. That's in the best interest of the people now, today.
Let's look at it from Venezuela is an example of what's going to happen in the United States in about 20 years anyways, to be quite honest.
You have that's an opinion.
No, that's not an opinion. That's coming. You're seeing this right now in the South. If you look at most of your Rust Belt states and how the towns are collapsing because of the industries leaving, coal mining disappearing, steel mills shutting down, auto manufacturing shutting down. A lot of that stuff is gonna come to the United States very soon.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a glass half empty and there's a glass half full. I mean, there's definitely some accurate factual information, but then some folks who quote some factual information do a great job of leaving as far as all the good shit that is also happening. But again, it just depends on if you want to see it half empty or half full. Okay. I mean, but definitely folks are entitled to that opinion. I mean, I've been hearing the United States is gonna, blow it. They've been saying that for 50, 60, 70 years. There's always something coming down the road, but so far so good. I mean, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Oh, okay. But nah, But hopefully, again, God willing, something happens down there. But because I mean, the people are really, really suffering down there, man, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, what's up, guys? How you guys doing?
What's that?
What's up, man?
I'm doing good.
What's going on, Anti?
Not much, man. Not much. How are you guys?
Good. Nick. Go ahead if you have any opinion on this.
I just caught the tail end of it. Was this a new development in Venezuela?
He won the election. He took office Friday.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, it's better. I agree with you guys. It's much better to have him as president than if he got, taken out, which they did try to with the drone. I believe was it last year?
They did more than that. Yeah, there's been like car bombs attacks and things like that.
Yeah, they'll do their best to try to get rid of him, but he has support from Cuba, I believe Russia as well, and a lot of the other.
Iran. He has support from Iran. He has support from Turkey. He has support from the whole entire, what do you call it? The OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Countries. That's about 36 countries.
Right.
He has support from Vietnam, China. China's already been there. We saw Turkey there last.
Well, hey, speaking of Turkey, I mean, can Turkey drop off a couple of turkeys to those hungry people in Venezuela?
Terrible.
I mean, I'm just saying, can they drop off some turkeys and some cows and toilet paper and shit? I mean, it's one thing to be supportive to somebody, but drop some food off.
But look, Preem, the point is this: there's hunger in the world, okay, and I understand what's going on down in Venezuela is bad, but you can't apply a short-term solution when in the long term you're going to suffer just like you are now. You might as well ride out in the long term, and the problem will be fixed in the long term.
But look at the alternative, Preem. If they sign
alternatives are worse than what you're trying to say.
No, Preem, I'll give you a good example.
These guys are riding it out in their plush palaces with their chauffeurs, eating 9-course meals, this and that, while their people are eating dead dogs on the street.
Who's this?
Well, those are the elites, though. That's the elites. What do you expect? No, I'll give you a really good example.
If all these big countries love them so much, and I don't doubt that they do, man, drop off some food.
But how do you know they're not doing that?
Something.
But here's a good example. Here's a good example from history. Like take Chile for example. Chile, they used to have a leader similar to Hugo Chavez named Salvador Allende. He was in power for a short amount of time. He did a lot of great work in the country, and then he got assassinated by the CIA. The country was doing fairly well. There was some trouble because of his. I believe it was his General Pinochet. He was backed by the CIA. Mm-hmm. He did a coup, right? And he takes over. The whole 80s was a disaster in Chile because this guy was, basically Chile was a puppet state of the U.S. government. So if Venezuela were to go that direction, next 10, 15 years, they're not going to be much better than they are now.
Exactly.
And they'll be a client state of the U.S. government. They'd rather keep their sovereignty and be poor than the other alternative, which they'll be poor anyway, but then they'll be, ruled over by the U.S. So that's the two choices.
Well, and what's happening is what brought the Tea Party to power in 2008, or at least gave them an emergence.
Wait, can you explain that? What is the Tea Party in regards to what, the U.S. or are you talking about in Venezuela?
The desperate conditions of lack of political capital and lack of resources. That's what's bringing, that's what's organizing a lot of poor white people in the South to to demand more from their government. But see, nobody ever looks at that, right? So they look at Venezuela and say, oh, well, he's such a bad guy, he should leave. But imagine if somebody told Donald Trump that he should leave. Because what's happening in the Rust Belt and what's happening with these coal mining facilities shutting down and these auto manufacturing facilities shutting down. Can anybody tell Trump that he should leave because the conditions in Alabama, where poor white people are living on top of sewage because their septic system backed up and they're too poor to have it, they can't afford to have it rebuilt? Should that determine that a president should leave?
Listen, again, it's all fine and dandy to go through the whole history lesson and all that, but these people need to eat today. They need to eat yesterday. They need to eat tomorrow.
All right.
Okay, there's a crisis going on. There's a crisis going on there on the ground, and the people who are making the decisions, they aren't missing any meals at all. So it's very easy for them to pontificate on what they're going to do for the national this and that and whatever, while their people, the overwhelming majority of their people, are suffering. Okay? It's easy for them to say, to give speeches, to look really good, to have their hair combed, be dressed all nice, when their people are suffering. Do something about it. I mean, once upon a time, a person would sacrifice himself. It would be nothing to say, okay, I'm going to sacrifice myself for X, Y, Z, for my family, for my country, for my people, this, that, and whatever. But now all of a sudden, it's admirable for this guy to say, okay, you know what? My people are suffering like hell. I'm doing good. But so I'm not willing to go ahead and sacrifice myself and to step down or to move away or whatever so that my people could have a better outcome, so that I can relieve their pain and their stress. Even though I don't agree with it, I'm not willing to go ahead and sacrifice myself for it. But because I don't have a plan. There's not a plan in sight to go in and stop this. It's one thing if you had a plan in sight, but there ain't no plan. It's getting worse.
Let me get to the next article.
Okay.
All right, this one is from Reuters.com. Venezuela Congress and U.S. government ratchet up pressure on Maduro. Caracas. Venezuela's opposition-run Congress declared President Nicolas Maduro a usurper on Tuesday, and the U.S. government indicated its support for an opposition leader, ratcheting up pressure on the socialist president as he embarks on a disputed second term. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration was considering recognizing the leader of the Congress, Juan Guaido, as the country's legitimate president, according to two people familiar with the matter. White House aides were weighing such a move among a list of options being prepared for Trump in response to the latest Venezuela developments, but no final decision has been made, one of the people told Reuters. Maduro was inaugurated on January 10th under the avalanche of criticism that his leadership was illegitimate following the 2018 election, widely viewed as fraudulent, with countries around the world disavowing the government. The United States and many Latin American nations say Maduro has become a dictator whose failed state-led policies have plunged Venezuela into its worst ever economic crisis, with no recovery in sight. Maduro says that the U.S. directed economic war is trying to force him from power. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence spoke by phone on Tuesday with Guaido to express his U.S. support for Congress as the, quote, only legitimate democratic body in the country, a White House official said. Venezuela's Congress on Tuesday also approved a measure asking dozens of foreign governments to freeze bank accounts controlled by Maduro's government. The measures call on United States, European Union, and several Latin American countries, governments to instruct regulatory agencies to prohibit any movement of liquid assets by the Venezuelan state in local bank accounts. The United States and EU have already imposed sanctions that limit the sale of Venezuelan government debt and freeze assets belonging to Maduro and a number of his top officials. A White House spokesman asked if further sanctions were in the pipeline, said the United States was considering all diplomatic, political, and economic tools in its arsenal in response to the usurpation of power by the illegitimate Maduro regime. So I want to read this real quick. This other paragraph. Venezuela's Congress on Tuesday also approved a measure asking dozens of foreign governments to freeze bank accounts controlled by Maduro's government. The measure calls on United States and European Union and several Latin governments to instruct regulatory agencies to prohibit any movement of liquid assets by Venezuela's state and local bank accounts. So there's money there, and the money that would be used, to help feed the poor is now being talked about being taken away from the government, the legitimate government. You're talking about a coup attempt. This is a coup attempt.
I think Preem don't want to understand that because the U.S. dollar is the way that almost everyone has traded, well, up to the last about 5 years or so, that the U.S. can virtually wipe out your whole account. You know, Venezuela might have $1 billion in the U.S. bank, and when it's frozen, Venezuela can't buy anything after that.
Hence, them trying to do the cryptocurrency, the petro.
Yeah, the petro, get around it.
Yeah, that's why they went. That's why they trade directly with all the countries like China and India. They buy oil from them, and the money gets paid directly to them. Or they started using the Chinese yuan for some of their trading. Venezuela was a country in the plus when Chavez came in, and it was still in the plus for a short while after, well, before Maduro took over, until they froze all of Venezuela assets. That's what sent Venezuela downhill, because Venezuela had so many assets. They were giving oil to people in the Caribbean. They were selling oil to people in the countries in the Caribbean, so that the Caribbean countries wouldn't go into debt.
Mm-hmm. Welcome, DE.
That's because they had a surplus in their finances.
Mm-hmm. Anti-gravity, do you have anything you want to
add? No, not at the moment.
Why no?
No. Yeah, actually, yes.
Please don't want to look at. If you watch the story with, especially with Libya. Libya was a country that owed nobody anything. And they did that. What they did to Libya is what they're doing to Venezuela right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a paragraph in that article you read that was saying how Washington would like to recognize the guy as the true president of the country.
Yeah, the council.
Yeah, yes. But the paragraph says such a move by the Trump administration could also backfire if Maduro took action to prevent Guaido from being sworn in. And also it was saying how if America recognized him as the true president, but he doesn't say that he wants that position, that's a clear sign. Well, we already know it's already a clear sign, but that's a clear sign in which the United States is trying to put in a president other than Maduro.
The thing is, the military is not gonna tolerate that, because they've seen that thing before with Chavez, right? So in 2001, for people listening and don't know, the United States, or 2002, there's some feedback coming from UD. the United States in 2002. Feedback coming from DE. Yeah, so the United States in 2002 tried to usurp. DE, you're having a lot of feedback coming from you. Okay, so in 2002, the United States had a some military officials go in and arrest Chavez and put him in jail. This lasted for 72 hours, and immediately they recognized the new government as this right-wing person. I forget his name right now, but basically they recognized him almost immediately. And this was under Bush. What happened was Chavez is a former military guy, and they went in. His former military buddies went in and broke him out of jail and brought him back into into power. And the United States then stopped recognizing that other guy as a legitimate president. And they've learned ever since then that not to trust the United States, and that's what's driving their policy. DE, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, you're correct about that. You're correct about that. That's when they started actually the back door, building up the opposition to overthrow the country from within instead of them doing it directly from without. Mm-hmm. And from what I'm hearing now, they are trying to push Brazil into leading attack on Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, that's going to send the whole entire region into chaos because Bolivia and Nicaragua has already said that if Venezuela comes under attack, they're coming to the defense of Venezuela. And Cuba has said the same thing. Trinidad and Tobago has already said that if there is a conflict, that they're getting involved as well. China, we covered an article some months ago, but China actually gave Trinidad some new warships. They're Coast Guard cutter ships, but they actually have some firepower on them. So that's a sign that they know that something big is happening in the region, and as long as there's turmoil in Venezuela, there's going to be a need for everybody to organize and get together and kind of put up a fight this time, because back in the 60s and 70s they didn't have that capability, but now you do have different allies internationally. You have Turkey, you have Qatar, you have Syria, you have many African countries who are supporting Venezuela. You have China, Vietnam, North Korea is supporting Venezuela. So this is not the same as it was in the 60s.
Oh yeah, this thing. I don't know, you gotta look at this thing as a world stage thing, because you see that before, China and Russia would sit out on the sidelines while the U.S. did what it chose to do. But now China is like kind of like poking the bear. So not China, but China is kind of like keeping up the pressure on the U.S. on one side, Russia is keeping up the pressure on the U.S. on the other side, and you have all these other small countries, individual countries, who are also flexing. They don't really have that much muscle, but they together they're like kind of like, I don't know. You have a lion with 4 or 5 hyenas around it that he doesn't know which one to attack. That's the situation the U.S. is in right now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, and instead of poking the bear, they're trying to grab the feathers off the eagle.
Exactly.
This is me just kind of reading the tea leaves on this, but Maduro's strategy looks to be, securing, funding from his allies globally, and then he has the political backing of Cuba, since there's, I'd say 3 or 4 powers in the region. So Cuba, Brazil, the U.S. Is there another one that I'm missing?
You mean Bolivia, not Brazil?
No, as in Brazil, Colombia, they're with the U.S.
Right.
Against Venezuela, but the kind of the axis that's with Cuba and Venezuela is most of the countries. I think Argentina. I'm not sure what their position is.
Argentina is against Venezuela. I think we read an article that they said that they want to. They don't recognize Maduro as a government, a legitimate government either.
So at least, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, keep in mind that the Argentine government is actually a CIA asset.
Right. Also, that and they're pretty much broke still, so there's not much they can do, at least in fighting any war against anyone at the moment.
Yeah, they're using Litecoin as one of their backup currencies.
Right. So Venezuela, they're taking the smart approach right now. They're securing all the backing from foreign, their foreign partners, and I think they're going to try to circumvent the sanctions as much as they can, and kind of wait till oil prices go up, because it's kind of one of the downfalls of being a commodity-rich country. Can you mute yourself real quickly, D? Oh, sorry. All right. Countries who primarily rely on commodities, they face these kind of pressures. So they're gonna, I think, try to hold off until the prices come up, unless something huge happens and they're able to restructure their economy. But that's just me. What do you guys think?
I think that's the game that anybody who wants to go up against the U.S., any country like Venezuela, they have to play that game. They have to play that game where they actually try to wear down the U.S. to the point where the U.S. gives up fighting. And the U.S. now, in the position that it's in, um, it's getting easier to do that, to play that game right now. It's getting easier with the passage of time, and the U.S. being in financial difficulties, and people leaving the dollar as their main trading currency. It's getting to a point where the U.S. won't be able to continue this.
Let me read this article real quick. This one is from theatlantic.com. Here's how Bolsonaro wants to transform Brazil. Land rights, education, the economy, and public security lie at the nexus of Brazilian president's priorities and critics' concern. If you're shocked by the transformations that Bolsonaro, you're gonna have to mute yourself, please. Brazil's new president is planning for his country. We haven't been paying attention. Riding in on a wave of frustration with more than a decade of left-wing leadership, Bolsonaro has promised to bring dramatic change to Brazil. Change intended to make leftists squirm. And if his first 2 weeks in office tell us anything, it's that those who thought his brash talk of ending policies creating protected land reserves and for indigenous populations, of liberalizing Brazil's gun laws to make it easier for Brazilians to own guns, was just campaign bluster, might want to take a serious look at the president's plans. He intends to follow through on his promises, even the most controversial ones. What happens in Brazil has consequences not just for the country but also for Latin America and the world. Brazil is the continent's biggest economy and home to both of the world's largest rainforests and 211 million people globally. Bolsonaro's critics fear that he could drive South America's largest democracy towards fascism or even toward a return to military rule. In unapologetic firebrand, he has already signaled that he intends to lead Brazil into a new era. But what exactly will that mean for Brazil and for everyone else? Land rights. One of Bolsonaro's first acts as president, which he boasted of on Twitter, a la Donald Trump, was to halt all new demarcations of indigenous lands. And in fact, that means the decades-long effect by Brazil's indigenous populations to seek recognition and legal title to land has been foiled. Bolsonaro has argued that demarked land for indigenous people is akin to keeping them, quote, secluded in reserves like zoo animals. When, quote, an Indian is a human being just like us, his critics, though, see an ulterior motive. Stopping demarcation process opens up land, especially in remote parts of the Amazon, to powerful players such as mining, farming, logging industries. Functionally, indigenous reserves has been used as a proxy for environmental protections. So, what's going on here? For the most part, is that he's going to allow foreign investors and companies to come in and usurp the land from the indigenous people. What that's going to do is going to allow companies like Monsanto and companies like John Deere and these other private companies to come in and mine the land and take away the rights from the people. That way, because land is power for poor people. So if they don't have any land, they don't have any real power before they can get political power.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree with you just said,
Mm-hmm.
but his explanation of taking away the demarcation of the land is a joke. We see clear through that. These logging companies that'll come in and continues to cut down Amazon rainforest. The article clearly said demarcations are a lot of these where these demarcations are in the Amazon rainforest. So they work both as land for the indigenous people and to conserve the rainforest. So they're going to destroy that. Also, under the education, it's a joke. Instead of him improving the education of the many people that go without education in the country, such as the article and these other favelas, he wants to take out Marxist, quote unquote, Marxist garbage about sexuality, gender issues, and evolution. That had, okay, that's a joke. Also, in the article, it talks about the economy. I forgot what it specifically said about the economy, but what I really want to get onto was the public. He wants to make it easier, and mind you, in a country where the suicide, not the homicide rate is already high, the highest in the world, I think. He wanted. It's not a joke, but this is serious. He wants to make it easier for Brazilians to get guns. Like Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, what really?
Because you have organizations like ALEC showing up inside Brazil to create stand your ground laws so that your pale skinned Brazilians can come in and basically shoot melanated Brazilians or African Brazilians.
Oh, and yes, I agree with that. That public security is a joke, but the economy, their government is hemorrhaging money because they're paying people their full salaries when they retire. It's a welfare state in some sorts, in some aspects. So he has to change that. People are against it, and he really can't mess with the military retirement because he has military backing. That's what the article was saying. But the public security is an absolute farce.
Well, he was part of he was a military general in the former military dictatorship in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll definitely have the military back. But I think it's kind of all of a farce because the rightful leader of Brazil, President, is Lula. There was a soft coup against him when they threw him in prison for quote unquote corruption, which he probably did. He probably did do the corruption, but that's kind of how it's played there. But they use that as a pretext to gain power. And Lionel is right to bring up the rainforest because basically what the so-called economic policy they're going to do is the Washington Consensus, which is basically the U.S. goes into countries, they privatize, all of the different public sectors of the country, and then they extract profits. So you're right about Monsanto coming in, Mike, and other large mining companies, deforesting the rainforest. This is going to be a huge disaster.
Chiquita Banana?
What was that?
No, I said Chiquita Banana.
What is that?
Chiquita is a brand of for fruits. Chiquita Banana, the company.
Oh, I haven't heard of it. I only know Dole that does bananas.
Right. But that's the point. That's the point I'm making. Chiquita is one of the companies. But you have companies like that want to come in and grab a lot of those agricultural resources off the ground, for farming and whatnot, away from the lower class that has spent decades surviving off of that stuff. That's exactly what they plan on doing, is taking it away from them. This is akin to land reclamation that happened in Africa, where the government's actually redistributed the land to the indigenous population.
You there, Mike? I can't hear you.
No, you're going to become more like the United States, where people don't have any rights on the ground, and they just have to accept things for what it is. And all your social institutions, because keep in mind that Cuba had over 1,000 doctors inside Brazil. And this guy comes into power, he stops paying these Cuban doctors. So now you have Cuban doctors sitting around saying, we're not getting paid for the work that we're doing, right? And then he kicks these doctors out recently. I think it was like the last week of December. He kicked them out without paying them.
Yep, he's going to be another guy in the U.S. pocket.
Mm-hmm. DE, you have anything you want to add to this?
The only thing I can see now is like before. I don't know if you remember the highway they built from Sao Paulo all the way up to Peru, and then they continued the same highway across to Guyana. That was to open up the area that we're talking about now. The Pantanal is the side on Peru, and they had slowed the growth, the deforestation, and the government was trying to get the native people to be a part of the economy by giving them the land, actually. But with this change now, like you said, the land is just opened up to anybody with the finances to come in and take it,
Mm-hmm.
and to push the indigenous people off the land.
Mm-hmm.
So Brazil, I don't know if you know, I've been hearing about what's going on in Brazil, but with deforestation, you virtually have every rainy season the topsoil being washed away down the Amazon. It ends up in the Atlantic Ocean off Guyana. And this is tons and tons of topsoil. And the flooding is getting to be really bad. So you can imagine if he opens up the whole area to now what's going to happen to Brazil.
It's displacing people out of homes, right?
Yeah, I mean seriously, it's changing the landscape in Brazil. You're not hearing very much of it because, well, our media doesn't really cover it. You have to read about it from like local newspapers in Brazil, people who make videos in Brazil, people who talk about it. But unless you're seeing these things, you won't know it's going on because nobody else is talking about it.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think I'm getting some feedback from you, D. I think what's eventually going to happen is you're going to have another Contras in the next couple of years if this guy stays in power. You'll see warring factions. I mean, you're seeing this right now in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and even Nicaragua. I saw videos in Nicaragua a few months ago, where you had these right-wing groups going around killing minorities. A lot of people think that this can't happen in the United States. It could very well happen. 95% of the 300 million guns in the United States are owned by white males, pale-faced males, I should say. If push comes to shove and there's a collapse in government, this could very well happen.
I like this guy. Just from a little bit that I've, read and heard about him. I like him. I like what he's doing. I like the change that he's bringing around. And, you're kind of seeing this spread. I mean, I think he's playing this smart because you can only ride the Marxist kind of kumbaya narrative for so long till you become a weak country and you get taken over. And that's just one of the vulnerabilities of it. I mean, the ideology, it sounds good, it's morally right, this, that, and whatever. But what it does is it makes you weak and you will get conquered. So either you go the nationalist route and you do some things that are uncomfortable, but to make your nation strong, or you do what's right, try to save everybody, the birds, the trees, the woods, and you get conquered. So I like his play. And, you're seeing this take hold even over in Europe. You have, some countries over there. They're like, listen, we tried this, save the world, save everybody, save this, save that, and do the right thing. But, we're hurting over here. We need to look out for our own nationalist, agenda and what's in the best interest of our people and make our nation and make our country strong and then make our country great. And every country has a right to go and do that. So this thing it's evolving into those two populist fractions. You're going to have the nationalists on one side, and you're going to have the quasi-Marxists on the other side. And one is going to be considerably stronger than the other one. The other one's going to have the morality and ideology on its side, but it's going to be fodder.
Mm-hmm. But he's not really a nationalist like that. He's a white nationalist. That's what he is.
He
might as well be a KKK member.
Yeah, again, I mean, that's perfectly okay, to go ahead and believe that and go ahead and think that. And, there are going to be a lot of people that think that of him, and probably a whole lot worse. There are going to be a lot of people that think,
it's not what you think. Mm-hmm. It's not what he thinks. It's what this guy is saying. He's basically saying that black people don't matter in Brazil. Like there's something like 65 to 70 million African Brazilians down there in those areas, and he's talking about basically getting rid of them. I mean, it's with this whole entire.
But I mean, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that. And if someone puts something in front of me that says he says this, there will be somebody else that says no, he didn't mean this. He meant it in this way, or he said this, or that's not real. So I just have to take that with a grain of salt and only go off of what I have seen and what I have heard, and the people that I've spoken to in the region, like, hey, what's up with this guy down there? He's talking big shit, and someone tried to kill him, and he's talking stuff about Venezuela and probably doing this and giving guns, this, that, and whatever. And some folks are like, yeah, he's a hard pill to go ahead and swallow, But the people who are actually down there, they're like, we'll see. Maybe someone like him was necessary.
He said some pretty flagrant things about Palestinians, and you at least had the Egyptian president call the Brazilian ambassador into office and say, and ask, what's going on with this guy? What's up with him? You can't be talking like that about Palestinians, despite the fact, there's differences with Palestinians, you just can't say things like that. You also had Vladimir Putin give this guy a phone call when he said, we're going to invade Venezuela. He got a phone call within a few hours, and Putin was on the phone asking him, do you really want to do that? Because if you go into Venezuela, we're coming in too. So you want to set off a world war, you want to set off a regional war. This is what this guy's talking about doing.
Okay, yeah. I heard that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, Preem, do you remember a couple of weeks ago that Russia flew a couple of their long-range bombers down to Venezuela? You know the reason why they did it?
I missed that one.
You miss a lot of stuff that is important to your argument, because if I believe if you were looking at some things, your argument would change.
Respect, brother. Respect. I mean, I remember last year Russia flew some fighters over the California coast and was flying close this way. Now, I mean, it's all saber rattling. It happens, you know, and I mean, it is what it is. You know, it happens. It happens. You know, I mean, everybody was talking all this shit about North Korea when, you know, North Korea is gonna blow us up. They got missiles, this, that, and whatever. And I was when I said, listen, trust me. They don't want it. They don't. It's not gonna go down like that. But you don't understand. You know, they got this. It's not gonna go down like that. And where we at now? Where we at now today? Nobody's saying that Russia is incapable. Russia's not flying them down there, this, that, and whatever. But it's not. It's not in their interest to go ahead and do something. I mean, they may do that to go ahead and show strength or whatever. But they aren't stupid. They aren't stupid. It's not gonna amount to nothing.
Well, what happened with what DE is explaining to you is that Russia now has 2 islands off the coast of Venezuela. That's what that discussion was about. Those cruise missiles that Russia has can go from those islands all the way up to the northern part of Georgia, and it's even capable of going all the way up into North Carolina, which is a military base there. So this is where we are right now. This is what has been forced upon poor people in that region. That there's a possibility that there may be a war. And if you look on YouTube,
they were a whole lot closer when they were in Cuba. So I mean, again, I'm not losing this. Nobody's gonna lose any sleep over this. Trust me on that.
Well, you may not lose any sleep over it, but these people feel very threatened over it. That somebody in Brazil is talking about. I'm referring to Venezuelans. These people feel very threatened that this new president called Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua the troika, a tyranny. So now they're talking about going into taking down. And this is coming from this guy, this new Bolsonaro. He said himself that he wants to take down Cuba, he wants to take down Venezuela, and he wants to take down Nicaragua.
Again, when you look at these countries, when we're talking about a country like Venezuela, and we have a guy that has a me against the world attitude, and he's willing to go all in, and put his back against the wall, and I'll die first for yada yada yo. All you got to look at. You can, again, this is not rocket science. All you got to look at, what are the people? How does he have the people behind him? The masses, the masses of the people. Are they behind him? And are the people behind him like the Vietnamese were, with the Viet Cong? Are the people like that? And if the answer is no, I mean, what else do you need to go? I mean, what else is there to go ahead and see? He doesn't stand a chance. You have to have the people, the overwhelming majority of the people behind you. He does not. These allies, all these other countries, it's fine and dandy. Again, if these folks are dropping off food, they can miss me with all that doggone ally talk. Okay, if they aren't doing that, and the people on the ground there aren't behind this guy, we're talking about nothing.
Go ahead, DE.
Spring, did you watch the Venezuela election? Are you serious about what you're saying?
Absolutely.
You know that the people of Venezuela re-elected Maduro. So when you say that the people got to be behind him, what are you talking about? If the people of the United States elected Trump, and now we have to live with his policy. I have never heard Maduro threaten the United States or any other country around Venezuela. So you're saying he's threatening and he's doing this? Where's your proof, man?
Okay, listen, look here. I mean, do we want to? I mean, we're not going to go into a deep dive into the election. Was the election fair, and what happened to all the other candidates? Were they assassinated? Were they put in jail? We ain't going none of that. All we're gonna say is, listen, this guy was reelected just like any other dictator is reelected. So that means that people are behind him. What I'm talking about is talk to people there in the region, go into the region, watch themselves about what the people. The people are leaving. Okay, the people are starving. The people are dying. Okay, the military, he's having military coups there. Okay, that's already happened. We all saw that. Now I don't spend day and night watching. You just got to show me a little bit. But the people in the military, I mean, he doesn't have that base of support there. Okay, he's
Are
in
you
power.
serious? I mean, where are you getting your information from?
He
does have that base of support. Venezuela is divided up. They don't have.
Then why are the people fleeing across the borders? Why are they selling their young daughters into prostitution?
That's actually stopped.
You got Mexicans that are fleeing across the border.
Now, honestly, with all due respect, we don't show any of those stories on here. None of that.
Because that's not happening. That's not actually happening. That's not actually happening.
Okay.
There's an exaggeration that people were leaving because they were selling their staples in Colombia to get U.S. currency. However, those people have since come back into Venezuela because one, the Colombian government doesn't have a place for them, and two, they can't get citizenship inside Colombia now because there's a new right-wing government in place. So they've sent all these people back. Most of these people have already come back. I think they took back 1 million people. They took back 1 million people 2 weeks ago.
So there is an exaggeration that the people are leaving?
No, there were people leaving for medical reasons. For medical reasons, because they could not get enough medical supplies because the medical supplies that were on the shelf were being sold in Colombia for U.S. currency. So there was a shortage of medical supply. That's why those people were leaving.
Okay, so all those stories are talking about the child prostitution, about the adult prostitution, about the murders, about the people leaving across the border. All those stories are false because we don't hear about those stories.
No, it's not. It's not that those stories are false. They're exaggerated. So the people that were selling their bodies were already selling their bodies to begin with in Venezuela.
Really?
Nothing
really?
new.
Really?
Preem, I need to get to the next article, please. All right, this next one is from RT. Russian Foreign Ministry has summoned the Japanese ambassador over comments of Tokyo about the status of disputed Southern Kuril Islands. Quick backstory: the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, has said that he wants to take back half of those islands, the Kuril Islands, from the Russian government, and that they won't be, they're going to expel the Russian citizens that are already on the island. Now, this has gotten Putin's attention because Putin last year offered President Abe, a peace treaty to sign a peace treaty to end the conflict between Japan and Russia because they haven't signed one since 1945. Although there were some agreements in 1956, there hasn't been an absolute peace treaty, so they're still technically at war. However, this new President Abe is getting aggressive because somebody's putting a battery in his back and saying you need to go take these territories back by any means necessary. And I don't think Japan has the military capabilities to go against Russia at this point. Any of you guys have something you want to add to this?
Do you know what's prompting it to, for them to make this move now, of all times?
Well, they probably want to put pressure on Russia because of the Crimea. They can basically put pressure on Russia for Crimea. But if Russia was willing to take Crimea, what makes them think that they're going to give up the Kuril Islands?
Do you think this is kind of them try to flex muscles, like, against China? Like, this is what we're going to do if you try to take any more territory in the South China Sea? Do you think it could be that?
I think it's a little bit of both. They think they can corner China, but the thing is, China has a massive military buildup right now. Japan doesn't have anything remotely close to that. I mean, they can put up a defense against China, but they can't put up an offense against China. How are you gonna stop, the 500 Chinese warships and 2,000 aircraft fighter jets that they have? They have 2,000 fighter jets that's waiting that are actually functional. I don't think that Japan has the capabilities to take on China or to deal with Russia on that level politically. To me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to what he thinks he's going to get out of it, because China is willing to turn reefs into man-made islands and put their military hardware on there to claim an AZ, and then you have Russia, who's been holding on to the Kuril Islands for the last 65, 70 years. They're not going to give those up. So
right,
somebody's putting the battery in his back to do this. Because the argument here is they think that those islands should be turned over back to Japan. But Putin's position is that you have U.S. military occupying Okinawa. Why don't you tell them to leave before you tell our people to leave the Kuril Islands?
Mm-hmm.
He backed down and never said anything. So,
just since Abe came into power, he's been kind of a hawk in terms of repealing the part of their constitution that makes it so they don't have a offensive military, at least. So maybe I'm thinking has to do with that. He flexes muscles, kind of creates, kind of manufactures a crisis up in the north of the country in order to have that part of the Constitution removed. What do you think about that theory?
Yeah, that's a possible theory. I think when you say he's trying to flex his muscles, it's kind of like Steve Urkel taking off his bifocals and pulling up his suspenders or something. Like, nobody's intimidated by that,
Right. Yeah, my best guess on the situation is that this is more internal, where he wants to get that repealed so that he can start building a military, but no hard evidence I can come up with.
Well, we have our Asian Pacific Chinese ambassador online. Please jump
in. Hey, what's going on, brothers? How you guys doing?
Chill, man.
Hey.
What's going on?
Yeah. What was the topic? I heard you guys talk about Constitution, huh? I'm surprised.
Japan wants to take back the Kuril Islands from Russia. And what Anti-Gravity was saying a few seconds ago was that maybe it's a possibility that they may want to use that to counter China.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not surprised because Japan and China has this long history of conflict dating all the way back to the 5th and the 4th century, believe it or not. So I'm not surprised. Now, one biggest concern is if they're going to take that island from Russia, I hope it's not going to be a reenactment of the second Russo-Japanese War. You talk about the first, back in the day, there was the first Russo-Japanese War, before World War I. So I just hope that's not going to get to that scenario.
Well, in that scenario, they won. So
yeah, I know. That's well, except in this case, Russia. Oh no, nobody has ever conquered Russia. Believe it or not, no country has ever conquered Russia. If you think about it, starting from the Mongolia all the way down to the Nazi Germany, no country has ever conquered Russia. So Russia was defeated in that case because it wasn't like being conquered. They just had to lost that battle. But yeah, now modern Russia. That's probably one of the. I would say that's probably one of the most fierce and one of the most fierce. If I'm not mistaken, I was second most fierce country in the world after the United States because uh they other than they told me apparently that if you're discounting the nuclear warhead capacity, Russia's military might is up there in terms of matching the United States. The fact that they always been ready to their battle readiness is also on par with the United States. So yeah, Russia is one country I know because everybody, even when anybody who live in China knows that that's probably the most powerful neighbor that you just don't mess with.
You're right about that. Besides China, Russia is the only other country that the Americans, Europeans have joined together and attacked that country.
Oh, you mean?
If you remember before the Bolshevik Revolution, Tsar Nicholas, they attacked Russia.
Yeah. Because they worry when Russia, because think about it. If Russia and China, let's say if Russia and China were to become one nation, right? That's like half of the landmass in the entire world, right? You just saw how big the Russia is, right? Man, literally, you think about Russia's huge. I think it can fit like 2 United States in Russia, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the area mass and so forth. So yeah, that's why they attack Russia because they worry that if Russia ever to rise again, that's gonna go back to the USSR. But yeah, so historically it was. So I'm not sure why Japan even bothered to again dispute with Russia. They know they're gonna have they stand absolutely no chance. I don't care how industrialized Japan is. I don't care how shit even China. No, believe it or not, I don't think if you take China, Japan, combined together and against Russia, you're still not gonna be able to defeat Russia.
Those islands, those Kuril Islands, have gas and oil under them. They have deposits under them that are untapped. That's what Japan wants. So in order for them to get that, they have to take back those islands.
Yeah. Also, there's also historical significance behind it too. So back in the because that island that you guys were talking about, the spew, that was actually part of the Qing dynasty back in a long time ago. So what happened is that during the colonial, the semi-colonial era of China, Russia came in and took a good portion of the northern China from to occupy a good part of northern China, and that island was part of the territory. So now Russia, since Russia came to possession, now Japan. What happened is that back in the first Russo-Japanese War, Japan took control of that. But then during World War II, when Japan was defeated, Russia took it back again. So that's why Japan now want to go back and dispute the island. So yeah, it's just a whole lot of mess. The whole Manchuria, what do they call it, Greater Manchurian area, because that includes the Manchuria part of China and upper part of the Manchuria, and that island's right next to it, right? That's the one we talk about, right? Because there was a couple of island dispute also.
I know. Did you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I agree with everyone's thoughts. I like the thoughts that anti-gravity put on the table. I did not think about that, but now that I think about it, it does sound like a common sense move. But this does sound like what China is doing in the South China Sea with the Spratly Islands. It seems like Japan is trying to take over those islands because they have a historical, cultural historical ties to them, and they're trying to take them back over. It would make sense that Japan does take these islands over to set some type of military bases on them and their military some type of way because of their position in that area of the world. That's it.
Yeah, the U.S. has to also push Japan into assuming more protection, or actually being more militaristic, because it it if you see the way the U.S. is going now, more of the U.S. budget has to go towards the military, and they can't please the local population. They can't improve, like the roads and infrastructure in the United States fall apart, and they have to decide whether or not they're going to give the military this money or if they're going to rebuild the country. So they got to have, that's like they're pushing the European countries to put more of their budget towards NATO. They have to do that, the same thing with the Japanese. They have to do the same thing with the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, all the other countries that traditionally China had a problem with. The U.S. has to kind of like push them into increasing their budgets for military purposes.
Let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from RT again. China to control space, knock out U.S. satellites. China's recent landing on the dark side of the moon and how this illustrates China's enormous investment in space technology. He discusses the implications of China's planned domination of space and laments the U.S. no longer takes space technology seriously. So we talked about space wars, last year, but this is actually coming to fruition now. China is talking about putting putting a space base on the moon, a new space station inside space, as well as ballistic capabilities inside space, basically shooting down other satellites. What do you think about this? Anybody else on the panel?
Well, the U.S. government has long been talking about Space Force. So China never before had the ability to do these things, and it's only now that they can, and they are not. Well, they are pushing the idea that it's for peaceful purposes, but still, once you got everything in place, Chinese never build anything for single purpose. They always do dual or triple purposes for the same technology.
Yeah. Over China going to the dark side of the moon. China is going to have this International Space Station. Did it say up and running or start by 2020, 2021?
You mean the space base on the moon, or you're talking about the new International Space Station that they're building?
The space station that they're building.
Oh, I don't think that's going to take place until like what 2023, 2025 or something like that.
Okay, but it's supposed to cost $5 billion. China is, if you haven't believed China's a superpower, then you have to believe China's a superpower now, because they're moving. They are. It seems like they're moving and not looking back. Yeah, you have these squabbles with the countries in your area, with foreign countries across the world. Who doesn't? But you still have to move forward, and they're moving forward. And it's interesting, at the end of that video, Rick Sanchez said the estimated cost of this space station for China to build is $5 billion. America is canceling their space push, and the cost that wants to build the wall is $5 million. So it seems like priorities. Where are your priorities?
You also get to keep in mind that they have a lot of human resources.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so they have a lot of educated people who can actually contribute to a project. Unlike in America, where you have a bunch of blue collar people who basically worked these union based jobs for so long, they didn't have that technological shift. for themselves. So you have a deficit in America in comparison to China, where you have all of these young people who are just, highly educated in STEM, that they can actually contribute to a project like this. Scholar Chang?
Yeah, Mike, you brought a very, very, very important point. So there's a surplus of STEM scholar. You guys know that China currently is producing, if I'm not mistaken, if not the number one or number two number of postgraduate students in the STEM disciplines, right? And all these STEM students, like I say, they gotta have a job somehow, right? So that's why China's embarking all this ambitious science, STEM research initiative. Is because essentially it's like a China. That's why, that's part of the reason I kind of dislike this article, the way this article kind of framed this as if some kind of conflict between China and America. Well, what China do right now is essentially what they're doing right now is they try to engage their own version of the New Deal. But the New Deal that Roosevelt engaged to create jobs for the unemployed American. That's exactly what China's doing right now. That's why they keep pushing all these STEM disciplines. Number one, of course, they want to achieve a technological advancement. Number two, really, it's a job creation program. But the thing about this, if we have millions upon millions of unemployed Chinese educated students and so forth, that's going to be a force. We're talking about millions. You talk about China. China is about 1/6 of world's population. Imagine the scale. Imagine the scale of the instability that will create, right? So that's why I completely agree with you, that you brought a very important point. That essentially is a form of a Chinese New Deal. One thing I also want to add is that, like I said, when you guys look at this article, like I say, make sure you be very careful in terms of the wording. Like for example, the article used the word, like I say, challenge, right? They used the word. I think they also used the word knockout, whatever. It's a very highly militaristic terms. Think about this. Let's be honest here. Despite all this rhetoric and so forth, China doesn't want to get into a war. China cannot afford to go to war with the United States. Even if China would go to war with the United States, China will be defeated. Let's just be honest here, right? Right? China's will have been defeated. So that's why all this rhetoric about the supposed clash, arms race, the new Cold War between China and America. A lot of these are, like I say, is hyper rhetoric in order to, like I say, the drum of the arms sales for all these weapons manufacturers. Like I say, it's just a new form of the enemy. That's what they're looking for. So that's why I don't see this as a. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What did you say? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll go after you. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't want to always view this as some sort of space race between China and America, because, like I say, China and America are way interdependent on each other. If anything, China is more dependent on the United States than America. America is dependent on China, because think about it. Without America, let's be honest. Without American market, you can pretty much forget about all this economy of China. Seriously, if America do a collapse tomorrow, China is going to be next in a matter of weeks. Because think about it, how much domestic U.S. debt that China hold? You think all this debt? Imagine all this debt just get default? Imagine the like I say, the amount of financial crisis that's going to create. So yeah, I don't know why you see this as some sort of space race. If anything, I would see that as more of Chinese desire to create, like I say, to embark their own STEM New Deal, STEM New Deal. Now, of course, like I say, do they have the desire to try to suppress the Western society? Yeah, maybe to some extent. Maybe they want to, because historically, like I say, the Communist Party, they have to please the Chinese public somehow, because otherwise they will lose all the legitimate justification for their continuance of regime. You guys know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's kind of North Korea, right? For example, kind of like North Korea, right? Without, let's say, North Korea, without keep blaming America, with so-called American imperialism for its for its poverty, for its starvation, for its all this domestic problem, that regime will collapse overnight. Same thing. China needs some sort of project, some sort of national project to drum out the national pride in order to continue to maintain the faith of the people in the government.
And that's
what otherwise, yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that we're clear on this as well. That that's exactly what Black people need, right? Black people need some form of inspiration to look forward to, and that's why we always talk about space and technology, right? Always, beating that drum that this is what you need in order to stay afloat. Go ahead, DE.
Well, in the case of Black people, we would have to take over or find ourselves in policy-making positions in the United States in order for us to have a say in what happens to us. If we don't have any say in how policy is constructed in the United States, I mean, I'm not American, and I'm just learning this thing, and from what I'm seeing, that's the way I see it. We don't have the policy makers in place that we can affect change in America, because everything that happens to us is made by policy from somebody else, either from California or Boston, or even from Canada. I mean, think tanks in Canada decide what the United States government is going to do for Black people in America.
All right. Intergraph, did you already have anything that you want to
add? Yeah, I just want to add one thing. What Scholar Chang said was true for the most part, but I agree. I'd say that the wording of the article is fair, because if China starts, whatever happens to be, putting out more military satellites into space, or making a space base on the moon, those are already provocative. So the U.S., Russia, Europe, Japan, they're not going to allow it, sitting down. They have to respond to it. That's kind of where the space race first with the Soviet Union started, because they put a, good.
No, I was just going to ask, are you saying that it's provocative because the U.S. already has a flag up there, or?
I mean, it's provocative as in, any actions that any government takes. So let's just take China out. Let's say like an African government did it. Like Ghana became a superpower, and they're putting a space base on the moon, or more satellites into space. The U.S. has to respond by putting another base on the moon, or building more rail guns. It inherently militarizes the space, unless there's some kind of comprehensive treaty.
That creates more jobs too.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it can create jobs in places like China, but in the case of the U.S., I don't think it will create jobs, because what happened is that the military-industrial complex already has that stuff built into place. They create everything, and as far as expanding the job market, it won't happen there. Our military-industrial complex is matured already, while the Chinese, they're still building into maturity. I don't know if you guys see how I see it.
We do. We understand you. At least I understand you.
So what was that whole Star Wars thing about that Trump put out?
Oh, he has a fetish for like Luke Skywalker or something like that. No,
wait, Star Wars or Space Force? They're two different things.
Yeah, I think it was Space Force. Whatever Trump was talking about. Yeah, I forgot it was either Star Wars or Space Force. He was talking about it last year to do something. He wants to train military in space or something like that.
wanted to turn the U.S. Air Force into a space force. Now, Russia calls their military the Russian aerospace forces because they have space capabilities. The United States government doesn't have anything remotely close to that. So what they want to do is turn NASA into a space force as well.
Very cool. Very cool.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, DE.
No, I'm listening in.
Okay. Let me go to this next article then, because we only have so much time left. All right. This next one is from Press TV. Anti-Iran summit in Poland aims to bring Israel Arabs closer. Mike Pompeo and the Polish government basically are trashing the Iranians under this sort of collaboration where they want to turn this the Aegis system, if I remember correctly, as a justification because of Iranian missiles. Why Poland? Why Poland wants to get involved in all of this? I have no idea. My opinion is that Poland has no right to be talking about anyone because they sit 1 hour away from Russia, and Western Europe doesn't care about Poland at all. So if anything was to happen, they're not coming to Poland's aid anytime soon. So if I was Poland, I would not be involving myself in anything.
Mike, I think the reason is because they're really jockeying for the U.S. to make a permanent NATO base in their country, to kind of protect themselves from Russia. But other than that, I agree with what you're saying.
When I look at this situation, I see what happened in Ukraine, where the U.S. is trying to put an advanced base in the Ukraine to kind of like the Russians saw it as, hey, you're trying to surround us, and a lot of since Russia was invited into Syria, a lot of the Arab nations began to look at Russia and say, hey, maybe we should consider being friends with the Russians. And this thing seems to be like to counteract that move. It might be incorrect, but that's the way I'm seeing this thing happen, play out.
I know. Scholar Shane.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the military base. So what happened is that for the Arab worlds, especially talk about those Gulf state. A lot of time those regime, like I say, they were propped up by the United. They were I won't say they're puppet. I won't consider them as a complete puppet, but in a way they are sanctioned by. Without the United States military protection, a lot of them were like I say have no legitimate justification. So that's why they need to have a military base to continue use that as excuse to rationalize the military U.S. Military's protection. So that's all. I'll agree. I think it was anti-gravity who said that. I forgot who's that gentleman just made a statement about the fact that they. But now, as far as Russia, on the other hand, so yes or no, because I don't think Russia really trying to get too much involved with the Middle East, other than like say Syria, because like I said, Syria was the actual ally with Russia. So I don't know. Russia has too much influence on this because I don't think the United States view Russia as a bigger threat in the Middle East as they view as that. For now, I mean, for now, they don't view Russia as a major threat in the Middle East. But they do view Russia as a major threat in Eastern Europe, which has always been the case. So that's all I want to ask.
Yeah, I think you're correct about that. Russia is the threat, but for if you look at, I don't know, prior to World War I, Russia never make any encroachments into Europe. Um, However, with the U.S. as far as the Middle East is concerned, um, the changes going on there. If you see like the U.S. going to the Iraq and pulled out, they started making changes, and when the resistance got to a point where they couldn't, they switched to another country, destabilized that one, and then they switched to another country and destabilized that one. Now Syria is being, I don't know, finding its way back, and you're gonna see other countries that might kind of rush and say, look, how we go about cleaning up our country, this mess that we got that the U.S. left, and if the U.S. can get the other Arabs that are going to be scared of this to go along with their plan, then it can keep, this enmity in the Middle East between the Arab nations.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to add one more thing real quick. So Syria, let's be honest here. No matter how people justify the so-called the civil war against Assad regime. Yes, Assad is a dictator, but he did not. Let me just mention it one more time. He did not commit that so-called chemical warfare, or whatever. Did you guys watch RT, right? The RT news, or whatever. I'm pretty sure. I think some of you guys also shared the link before too, in terms of RT. RT used to have a segment, the entire segment that the exposing the so-called lie about Assad regime using supposed chemical, biological weapon against its own citizen. Actually, the people who were using it were those so-called rebels, those so-called peace-loving rebels, with whom eventually turned into become ISIS, or whom also become the so-called Islamic fundamentalists that terrorize the region. So that's why I never like say again. That's why part I never understand why Western Europe or as well as the United States support that a faction that's not only totally anti-democratic but also uh, it's also anti-Western society. So yeah, that's what I want to add. That's what I want to add in terms of the Syrian situation.
All right, let me jump to this next article. All right, this next one is from USAtoday.com. National Security Council acts for military options to strike Iran, report says. President Donald Trump's National Security Council acts for military options on striking Iran in response to the country's support of insurgents in Iraq, the Wall Street Journal reported Sunday. I hate these pop-ups, man. The council, under National Security Advisor John Bolton, made the request after militants aligned with Iran fired 3 mortar rounds into diplomatic section of Baghdad, which includes U.S. Embassy, according to the report. The mortars landed in a vacant lot and no one was injured. The journal reported that Pentagon developed plans for a strike on Iran in response to the National Security Council request, but it is unclear whether those plans were shared with the White House or Trump. Unnamed sources told the journal that the request raised alarm with the Defense and State Departments. Quote, it definitely rattled people. A former senior administration official told the newspaper. People were shocked, and it was mind-boggling how cavalier they were about hitting Iran. A current senior administration official disputed that characterization, telling USA Today that the Pentagon and State Department were not caught off guard. Quote, National Security Council spokesman Garrett Marquis said in a statement that the council, quote, provides the president with options to anticipate and respond to a variety of threats. We continue to review the status of our personnel following attempted attacks on our embassy in Baghdad and our Basra consulate, and we will consider a full range of options to preserve their safety and our interests, Marquis said. A former U.S. officials told the Journal it was unnerving that the new National Security Council asked for far-reaching military options to strike Iran in response to attacks that caused little damage and no injuries. What do you guys think about this? The idea of a false flag operation being used to go inside Iran at this point under Trump, especially with Bolton and being a part of the National Security Advisor Council, or at least being the lead.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
What do you guys think about this?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I kind of predicted this when Bolton first got nominated to be, National Security Advisor. This guy has had a hard-on for invading Iran for almost like 2-3 decades now.
I mean, for me, I would hope they can come up with something better than it hit the parking lot. Seriously. When I read that, I was laughing because I was wondering who in the world believed that. I'm looking at all the other countries in the world and nobody is saying anything. It's almost like they're waiting for the U.S. to see if the U.S. are really going to go forward with something like this.
Yeah, and an attack on Iran would bring Russia and China involved, and bring in Pakistan and Syria and Lebanon, Turkey. It would just be a cataclysmic event. Nobody would be safe from that.
Yeah, I'm serious. If me was going to give Trump some advice, I would say, look, do you think after you did something, if you attack Iran, how is any of your assets safe anywhere on the planet? That's the question that these people should be asking.
Yeah.
What's
yeah,
that?
there will be. I said, yeah, there will be. But, at the end of the day, these guys would just, everybody just come together. They'll talk it out, and they'll work it out, and better heads are going to go ahead and prevail. They just have to go ahead and go through this and go through these motions and all the saber rattling. But eventually, just like North Korea, we'll all sit down and talk it out and work it out, in something that works out for everybody. That's in everybody's best interest. I'm not sure what the beef is that they have amongst each other right now is, but the smart thing to do is just to go ahead and talk it out.
So, well, Trump does not have as much financial interest in personal financial interest in Iran as they have in the Gulf states. So that's why he's a lot more belligerent toward Iran than he is toward those Gulf states in terms of supporting Islamic fundamentalism. So that's why but the problem is that he still got to appear to be tough, right, to his voting base, right, to his electorate. He want to present himself as a nationalist that's one to stand up to the so-called Islamic power and so forth. But that's why he's trying so hard to make example out of the Iran. He can't go after the Gulf states because he know that he has his financial interests in Gulf states are a lot higher. So that's why. Now, in terms of will his assets be safe if you are to get into a conflict with Iran? Depends. I would say depends. Because Iran's, like you say, Iran's reach to the Arab world is still not as prominent as as those Gulf states countries and so forth. Iran predominantly if anything, Iran's sphere of influence is mainly still in the central, Western Central Asia area right now. For now, of course, eventually it's going to change, especially with the Iraq situation. Eventually, that's what Iran, that's what Iran trying to do right now is extend its influence into the Middle East. Um, but as far as Trump's assets, yeah, unless like I said, Iran was smart enough to engage some sort of uh, sabotage effort against Trump's financial assets.
Hmm.
Uh, but other than that, he basically he sees no problem of challenging Iran in terms
Well,
of not causing his own personal harm. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that keep in mind that Trump doesn't have a foreign policy. Trump's a businessman. He's
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
a
Exactly.
politician.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's not a politician. So his foreign policy is outsourced to very psychopathic people, not just here in the United States, but to other, to other countries. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud, are very much afraid of an expanding Iran, and then you have Israel. I'm hearing some feedback from somebody. If you got headsets, please use them. Um, there in Israel, Israel is very much afraid that if Iran ends up putting their military bases and ballistic missile capabilities inside the northern part of Syria, uh, there's a high probability that they will lose a war going against or attacking Syria again. They won't win. Uh, it'll be a no-fly zone for Israel. Um, why the United States would want to engage in something like this on behalf of such a little place the size of New Jersey doesn't make any sense to me. Um, Only thing I can actually tie it back into is that they have a shared ideology of supremacy, but that's not enough, for somebody like Donald Trump to actually get involved in. But a lot of these decisions are being made behind his back, without any sort of consideration. Trump doesn't understand Muslims anyways. He said, "What's the difference between Shia and Sunni? I thought they were all Muslim." This is coming from him, so he doesn't even have any understanding of what's going on foreign policy wise as well as domestically.
Right. And if we even take let's take like the best case scenario where Russia, Turkey, Syria, they all abandon Iran as well as China, and the U.S. just goes in alone because the European countries are not gonna back the U.S. this time like they did in Iran with Iraq, I should say. The U.S. goes to war with Iran is a disaster because it's almost unconquerable terrain. So they're in that country, what, another 20 years like they are with Afghanistan? There's, it's a lose-lose situation.
Hmm.
Yes, but that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah, but then all the assets,
It's not
all the
about.
U.S.
Give,
assets, no
D,
matter.
give Paul Bryan a chance. Paul
Oh,
Bryan.
sorry.
Good evening, Chance. To specifically speak to what Anti-Gravity just said, the goal is not an outright military victory, which can be achieved. It's not as difficult as you think, even with the extremely rough terrain. The goal is prolonged military presence, okay? Because prolonged military presence does several things. It keeps the nation and the region weakened and destabilized. It has the follow-on effect of generating profits for defense contractors here in the U.S. All foreign policy in this country has been dictated. It has We've had the blueprint, the way forward, published by the Products for the New American Century. You know exactly what the blueprint is. No one is paying attention. Step by step, it has been followed like a blueprint or a Bible. That's the goal. It's not about beating anyone. As long as you as long as you achieve the basic military objectives, the goal then is to maintain an ongoing military process. So exactly what you just said, as far as U.S. forces being in, say, Iran, hypothetically speaking, for the next 20 years, that's the goal. That's exactly what's wanted. It's not about clear, swift, decisive military victory. With all of that said, you know, military policy and foreign policy, right? It's none of it is being made by Donald Trump. Okay, do not think that for 1 second. It's none of it is being made by him. That's about all I was trying to say.
Go ahead, DE.
I understand what Paul said, but to attack Iran, yes, they will destroy the infrastructure, but now Iran doesn't have to think about what the world's going to think when they attack Saudi Arabia or Qatar or when they attack other U.S. assets anywhere in the Middle East. Iran doesn't have to hold back and try to convince the world, hey, we are the good guys anymore, because now they are being attacked physically. Everybody can see that the U.S. is attacking them. So that's my thought on this.
You know, and you know, and again, if you look at this from the standpoint of the long game, I mean, after you go ahead and, you know, fire off a couple of bottle rockets, what's left of you? You're done. You know, I mean, you're say again?
No, you said bottle rockets?
Yeah. You know, once you go ahead and fire off a couple of bottle rockets, I mean, you know, you go ahead and get that out the way. You kind of, you know, put a couple of dings in a couple of places. After that, you're done for decades. You know, I mean, the other day I said this when I think we were even talking about the same Iraq-U.S. deal. I said sometimes it's not about, you know, who won. It's about who lost the least. So if you're going to lose your country, if your country we're going to knock you back into the Stone Age, and you're not going to be any semblance of what you are for decades and decades, or as long as we decide to go ahead and be there, you know, you've essentially lost. You know, it's like the little victory, the little, you know, bomb over here, a little rocket over there, a little missile over here. It's all fine and dandy. You're going to go ahead and get those off, but you will cease to exist. That's it. You're done. You know, I mean, is it really worth it at the end of the day? It's not. And that's why, you know, they're going to do this talking and this, that, and whatever, but, you know they have far, far more to go ahead and lose. Far more to go ahead and lose.
Wait, with the bottle rockets, are you talking about Iran or are you talking about the Palestinians?
I'm talking about the U.S. Bottle rockets. I'm being facetious when I say that, but you know.
I didn't know who you were talking about. All right, good.
Yeah, Iran. Yeah, you know, I mean, again, they just have to weigh it if it's worth it. If they want to go out and blaze of glory like that, they can, or they can try to, but I doubt if they will. They won't. You know, and they're gonna go ahead and wisen up and make, you know, a smart decision and play ball as they should.
All right.
As they should.
Let me get to this next article. This next one is from RT. European Spring. Salvini wants to end former Franco-German access on the continent. Italy's Eurosceptic Deputy Prime Minister Salvini has said he wants Italy and Poland to join together to create a European Spring, which could end the long-standing French and German domination on the continent. Mr. Paul Bryant, you have anything you want to add to this?
Well, yeah, I find it amuses me to think that those two countries, 60 years later, would ever be on the same side of anything. But as they say, politics makes strange bedfellows. It would also appear economics makes strange bedfellows. Beyond that, I don't make much of this, because at the end of the day, Germany is be de facto economic engine of Europe. Okay, once you get through all the public consumption news stories, Europe economically right now, 2019, does not exist without Germany. So uh, anyone anyone state leader can say whatever he wants. That is not going to change anytime soon. So I put as much worth as to what this man is saying as I would a fart in the wind.
You said bedfellows or bed bugs? Gravity, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the two brokest countries in the EU thinking about teaming up against France and Germany's, dominance in the region. That's never gonna happen.
Well, you could see Europe spill into a civil war, right? I mean, this is like the beginning, right? We see Steve Bannon traveling, from the UK, from Canada to the UK, all the way up to Poland, to the Ukraine, organizing far right members to get them on the same page, to create this new far right movement. So, maybe everybody's going back into their own little stables and saying, we don't want to play ball anymore. We don't like what's going on. When you call when they call for an alliance, when you have two broke people getting together, it's almost like European Ray and Pookie, talking about taking down, a juggernaut. I just don't. Not that I don't put any stock behind it, but I do see why they would. It's whether or not they can execute. DE, go ahead.
I don't know. From what I saw, right, I think Italy went into the EU expecting more than they really got out of it. There's something similar to what happened to the Greeks, and Poland got trapped into the EU really because they didn't realize what was happening to them until they were there, and then they realized, hey, we are just the front lines of the EU against Russia. So,
do you think that so much feedback coming from you, DE? Do you think that you said that they got kind of tricked? Poland got kind of tricked. Do you think that Poland got slipped a Quaalude, from Bill Cosby or something like that, or what do you think?
Well, they looked at the EU as being, when they joined into the common market, they look at trade. There are people going to be able to travel, which would bring income into Poland, because a lot of Poland, if I don't know if you were watching the problem with Brexit, a lot of Poles are in England. A lot of Poles. They were complaining about the Poles taking jobs from English people. So you have a country that says, when we join the EU, we're going to get this. And then, yes, they got some of it, but then they realize, hey, we are the front lines for Russia, because now everybody is the lines, when the countries that were formerly the Soviet Union started coming into the EU, Putin started complaining, and he started pointing out what's happening. And then the people who were running these countries realized, yep, that is what happened to us. And Poland was already part of the system, so there's no way you can get out. And for Poland, it would be foolish to try to get out, because they're looking at what's going on in England right now. And if the British, which were part of this troika between Germany, France, and England, if the British find it so difficult, Poland would even have it worse. I mean, they would strip Poland of everything that they did there, and it will be back to nothing again.
A lot of people don't realize, and that's a good point that you made, a lot of people don't realize that the EU is a colonialist project. It's colonizing all of these other minor EU countries, and basically plundering all their resources. This is what happened with Greece, and I think DE brought this up earlier, and I think Paul Bryant brought this up, that these weaker countries have no other choice but to submit to the to the to the superpower of Germany, which is what Hitler wanted in the first place, was everything to revolve around the German Empire, and he got his wishes years later, right? Um, so it just seems to me that Poland is politically promiscuous. They all they mess with the United States. They used to be with the Russians and the Soviet Union. They're looking to build a military base for Trump called Camp Trump. They flirt with Israel a lot. It just seems like they're always messing with somebody and not getting anything in return.
Mike, I've been saying a long time that the EU was Hitler's dream of New Germania just 50 years after he envisioned it, because realistically, that's all the EU is. Because Germany is the de facto economic engine of all of Europe. They're the economic power. They are the engine that makes everything run. So, and the way you briefly touched upon Brexit. In fact, you know what? I won't even touch that grenade now, since it's not even on the docket. But yeah, whether it's Italy, Poland, Greece, or Turkey, I don't take anything the leaders of any of those nations say seriously, because at the end of the day, they have nothing to bargain with economically. And at the end of the day, a nation, when on the global stage, only has two guns: the economic gun or the military gun. And any of those nations, they don't have either. So it really doesn't matter. Whatever Germany tells them to do, they will do. So it really doesn't matter what they say for public consumption.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me get to this next article. New York Times. Trump discussed pulling U.S. from NATO, aides say amid new concerns over Russia. Washington. There are a few things that President Vladimir Putin of Russia desires more than weakening of NATO. The military alliance among the United States, Europe, and Canada that has deterred Soviet and Russian aggression for 70 years. Last year, President Trump suggested a move tantamount to destroying NATO, the withdrawal of the United States. Senior administration officials told the New York Times that several times over the course of 2018, Mr. Trump privately said he wanted to withdraw from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Current and former officials who support the alliance said they feared Mr. Trump could return to his threat as allied military spending continued to lag behind the goals of the president had set. And in the days around a tumultuous NATO summit meeting last summer, they said Mr. Trump told his top national security officials that he did not see the point of the military alliance, which he presented as a drain on the United States. At the time, Mr. Trump's national security team, including Jim Mattis, then the defense secretary, and John Bolton, the national security advisor, scrambled to keep American strategy on track without mention of a withdrawal that would drastically reduce Washington's influence in Europe and could embolden Russia for decades. Now, the president's repeatedly stated desire to withdraw from NATO is raising new worries among national security officials amid growing concern about Mr. Trump's efforts to keep his meetings with Mr. Putin secret from even his own aides. An FBI investigation into the administration's Russian ties. A move to withdraw from the alliance in place since 1949, quote, would be one of the most damaging things that any president could do to U.S. interests, said Flournoy, and Undersecretary of Defense under President Barack Obama. It would destroy 70 years plus of painstaking work across multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat, to create perhaps the most powerful and advantageous alliance in history. what do you guys think about Trump wanting to pull out? I think the isolationism is going a little bit too far for Trump. Not that I don't support pulling out of NATO, but I do see the deep state being in biting their nails at this point, saying this guy's a Looney Tune. Let's hurry up and get him out of power.
I am of a different mind, Mike. I am of the mind that it is the deep state who's calling that shot. I don't see President Trump calling any of these shots. I do see the deep state making that call to pull out of NATO. I do not take anything any of these politicians say for face value. They're all puppets. They're all actors playing roles. Now, as far as pulling out of NATO, if we're seeing a change in world demographics, if we are seeing a new player sitting at the table, that being China, if we are seeing Russia trying to get back to Soviet Union levels of military power and influence, what better way to keep that global boogeyman game going and to pull the U.S. out of NATO? Everything that happens, you have to look at it for what's for global public consumption and what benefits all deep staters around the world. They're two different things. You have to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. DE?
I don't know if you guys are going to agree with me on my idea. But what I'm thinking of is that the U.S. is trying to kind of relocate some of its assets into Africa in a late run to, I don't know, build a wall against China, or at least be in the mix to kind of slow China down in Africa. Mm-hmm. Because if you see the kind of reaction when China made known this Belt and Road Initiative, at first everybody just threw up a big yawn and say, it won't happen. But then when they start putting the pearls together, when they start stringing the pearls together and say, man, there was a loud, oh shoot, China's in our backyard, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And you see the U.S. You see Obama at first says, hey, we are moving our troops to the Far East, and we are moving into Africa. And the next president coming on and said, hey, we got to move out of Europe. Mm-hmm. And the policy, one president doesn't make the whole policy. He just passes on little piece to coming presidents. So it appears like these guys are making different policy ideas, but they all follow in the same policy. That's what I am seeing. I may not be seeing everything, but I look at it and that's what I see.
Integraphy?
Yeah, I think this would be quite disastrous for the U.S. because the U.S. is really who's keeping peace in Europe. Because if they pull out their troops, then now the Europeans are fighting for, okay, who's going to be, the head? Who's going to do the protection? Who's going to be the leader of the NATO?
Well, maybe that's why they're creating the European army.
Right. But I mean, like, if he pulls out now, that kind of puts them in a quandary, don't you think?
Have you ever read The Way Forward by the Project for the New American Century?
I've heard of it.
Have you read it? You have to read it. Every question that has been brought up tonight is answered in that treatise.
What's it called?
I'm telling you, take the time to find it and read it. You will see things a whole lot differently.
Paul, if you get a chance, could you drop that in our email thread?
Yes, I will absolutely do that, Mike. Definitely, I will. If I don't get a chance to do it this evening, I will absolutely do that tomorrow, because every social, economic, military, political move that has been made by the United States of America since 2000 has been laid out in a blueprint called The Way Forward by the Products of the New American Century, Wolfowitz and Pearl. If you want to know everything this country has done for the past 19 years, it's laid out there. Okay, including having the U.S. withdraw from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You have to look at global politics much, much differently. Public consumption, you can't, any of these Yashi, even heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, whatever names that they have, kings, queens, anything that they say, that's all public consumption. They do everything. It's a global game, for lack of a better word. You know, you have a global boogeyman, one who counters that, and then you look at the socio-economic policies and military policies for each state's military-industrial complex, and then you look at the underlying interdependency of the economies of each state. Now, built into that is military conflict, having people die, human suffering. That's all a part of it. You have to, if you really want to get a better understanding and better idea of how these countries move, I actually tell you have to read that.
All right. I just want to get to this next article. This one is from RT.com. Ankara won't buy Patriot missiles with condition of dropping S-400 deal with Moscow, foreign minister. Turkey won't strike a deal on purchasing American-made Patriot air defense missile systems if the United States ties it with tearing up the existing arms contract with Moscow, the foreign minister said of Turkey. Quote, the S-400 deal has already been finalized. We can agree with the U.S. on the Patriot system, but not if there will be a condition to abandon the S-400s, the minister stated on Thursday, as quoted. Turkish media reported earlier that the contract presented by the Americans says the missiles will only be delivered if Ankara abandons the S-400 purchase. The U.S. Department of State approved the sale of 80 Patriot missiles, 60 PAC-3 missiles interceptors last month. Turkey's foreign minister confirmed that Ankara received a formal proposal to buy the weapons, and will consider the terms. But in no way should Washington attempt to meddle in the nation's arms deal with other partners, the minister said. The deal to buy Russia's advanced S-400 defense missile system was signed by Ankara last year following lengthy negotiations. The first batch of S-400s is scheduled to be deployed in October. Alerted by Russian-Turkish talks, officials in Washington unsuccessfully attempted to dissuade its ally from dealing with Moscow. Last year, Congress passed a law effectively blocking the shipment of 100 F-35 fighters to Turkey. Lawmakers cited the risk that the sale of S-400s poses to the U.S. and NATO. U.S. diplomats and military officials similarly tried to pressure India out of buying the S-400 as the transition could potentially violate American laws on sanctions placed on Russia. According to local media, Washington even proposed granting New Delhi a free pass on receiving arms from Moscow if it also buys U.S. F-16 aircraft. It's interesting that they would sell these, or they'd be willing to sell these Patriot missile batteries to Turkey, because why would Turkey actually need them, right? If I have an S-400 air defense system, I really don't need anything else, unless it's a part of a multi-layered strategy, a multi-layered security framework. But in terms of the Patriot missile compared to the Russia's S-400, I don't think I would need that, even if they did give it to me for free. I don't think I would want that, right? If I have it, who am I using it against?
Yeah, I'm back. This is America flexing, trying to flex their power, saying, "Hey, purchase that. If you do that, we're going to punish you." Kind of like slapping the baby's hand. Stop that. Then these countries saying, I don't care what you say. I'm going to purchase it because I have the right to purchase wherever I want to. So now that America's saying, hey, if you purchase that to NATO countries, if you purchase that, they're not compatible with our Patriot system. So, we don't know what you're going to do. Kind of guilt them to saying, if you purchase that, we can't protect you. So yeah, that's why I see it. I mean, the S-400s are known to be better, surface to air missile equipment. So that's where our countries are going to. New Delhi, Ankara. I think two more other countries are doing it. So yeah,
India, China. DE, you have anything you want to add to this?
Not really. Not right now.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. This one's from Al Jazeera.com. Israel fires missiles towards Damascus airport, Syria state media. Most of the missiles were shot down, Syrian state media reports, but one hit a warehouse at the Damascus airport. Israeli warplanes had fired a number of missiles towards Damascus, triggering Syrian air defense that shot down most of them, according to state media reports. The results of aggression so far were limited to a strike on one of the warehouses at Damascus airport. Sana news agency cited a military source as saying the attack took place at 11:15 p.m. It said. The state agency also quoted a transport ministry source as saying that the airport was running normally. Syrian state media broadcast footage of what it said were the air defenses firing, with bright lights seen shooting across the night sky. Explosions were heard in one of the videos. Israel has mounted attacks in Syria as part of its effort to counter the influence carved out by Iran, which is supporting President Bashar al-Assad in the war that erupted in 2011. Many of them have been in the areas south of Damascus. Quote, two areas hosting military positions of Iranian forces and a Lebanese Hezbollah movement have been targeted, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights Monitor said. These were near the airport and around the Kowesh area of south of Damascus, the observatory said. In an earlier report, Sana has spoken of Syrian air defense batteries attacking enemy targets. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed not to let Tehran entrench itself militarily in the war-torn country. The last Israeli attack reported by the state media was on December 25th when a missile attack wounded 3 Syrian soldiers. A senior Israeli official said in September Israel had carried out more than 200 attacks against Iranian targets in Syria in the last 2 years. Anti-gravity, anything you want to add to this?
No, nothing on this one, but it's just something we should keep an eye on future hangouts.
Paul Bryant?
No, not much, bro. I condemn this in the strongest. It's typical of what Israel does. But I could probably talk more about that. But I have touched on it on many hangouts here. Israel will, at random, launch missiles at civilian targets against any of the Arab states, including in the Palestinian areas, and they don't care, and they absolutely get away with it in mass media around the world. So for now, that's about all I have to say on this.
Let me move on to the next article then. Or DE, unless you have something you want to add to that.
I don't know. I heard some news I saw on RT, I think it was, that the Israelis had used the one missile that actually did hit the airport or some area around the airport. The airport had the Israelis had to use a passenger aircraft as cover, and the Syrians didn't want to put that airplane in jeopardy. That's why how that missile actually got through. And the Israeli aircraft that fired it, that's how they escaped, because they came in over Lebanon using passenger aircraft as cover. And the Syrians and the Russians opted out of retaliating to avoid harming those passengers.
Yeah, my thing is, and I just want to say this real quick. My thing is, what's the point of Russia being in Syria if they can't protect Syria from Israeli fighter jets? I just don't understand. You have the S-400, you have the Pantsir S-1, you have the Tor M2, you have Buk M2 missiles in Syria. You have a number of radar technologies inside Syria, but yet you still can't seem to stop these guys from coming in. What's the point?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? You said, what's the point of Russia being over there in Syria if they can't do shit to protect them?
But Russia is a security guarantor of Syria. That's what keeps the United States from completely bombing it. However, having all these advanced air defense systems inside Syria, but you still can't stop these guys from coming in. It just seems, you don't seem like a very reliable partner. I don't know if I really want, to go to a bar and hang out with my buddy and have a drink, and he watches me get a bottle smashed over my head, and he just stands there and says, I was in the bathroom, I was tying my shoe or something. Like, I don't really need you to be with me if you're not going to be there 100% of the time.
Exactly.
Do you think this could be because of some deals that they have with Israel?
Who?
Russia. Because I remember they were on a call or they met in person. I don't quite remember. Netanyahu and Putin.
I think Netanyahu wants guarantees that Iran was supposed to leave, right? So this idea that Iran was building or has secret sites inside Syria, and they didn't want Iran there. But prior to Iran even getting there, Israel has been at war with Syria since 1973, since the Yom Kippur War. There was no Iranians there in the first place, right? There was no Iranians there until the late 80s, right? It was Syria that actually helped out Iran during the Iraq War at the end. So this idea that we need to get rid of these Iranian troops inside Syria. How do you know who's Iranian and who's not? Where are you getting this intelligence from? I just don't buy that. Like, there's no way you could look at a Persian person and then look at an Arab and be like, oh yeah, those are Iranian soldiers. We'll take those guys out. Like, there's no way for you to know that.
Has Russia lost any soldiers in the last 5 years in Syria? I'm just curious.
Oh, they lost probably about 250, if not more.
To who? To the other? To like the I'm sorry.
The Americans have bombed them.
Okay.
The terrorists have shot down their helicopters and have kidnapped their soldiers and stuff like that. So they've paid in blood, and so have the Iranians. The Iranians lost about 500, if not more, soldiers inside Syria. So they've all paid in blood. So they're making sure that they're not going anywhere.
Didn't the Israelis shoot down one of the Russian bombers or something like that?
Turkey shot down a Russian Sukhoi over the northern part of Syria. Now, if you're referring to what happened in September, where the IL-20 surveillance aircraft for Russia was actually shot down by a Syrian missile because of Israeli jets hiding behind it, yeah, I would attribute that to Israel being at fault too.
Right.
Okay, that's when Netanyahu actually went to Moscow to meet Putin.
Right, because there was discussions happening outside of Putin's cabinet that a Russian military were going to lay the hammer down on Israel, and then Putin said no. Since Putin controls the armed forces were actually deciding that they should retaliate.
That I find that to be very interesting, given Putin's history. And he has shown an absolute willingness to pick up the phone and press that button to send to take military action. So for him to not take military action in the face of his soldiers, troops sustaining losses, I find that to be very interesting.
Yeah, he from what I understand, when I was I spoke with what's his name from RT? I forget his name. He's the he used to be in NATO, but he's an analyst over at RT, security analyst. He said that they were making these decisions behind closed doors, but without Putin, that they were going to go ahead and just retaliate. But when you really calculate it, they decided that they were just going to go ahead and put the missile systems in place. Syria was supposed to get the S-300s in 2009, and yeah, they were supposed to get the S-300s in 2011, and that's when the conflict broke out. So then there was a United Nations Security Council veto against any sort of military weapons being delivered to Syria. So that was a holdup. But that's when Putin said, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and just make this delivery now in 2018. So that's where that comes in. That was their chess move, I guess, their pawn. But from what it seems like to me, they don't seem to have a whole lot of patience for Israel anymore at this point. I think they're getting to the point where they're going to start retaliating. My other understanding is that they gave Hezbollah cyber warfare capabilities on the ground in Syria. So a lot of the Hezbollah unit that was fighting in Syria actually took it back to Lebanon with them, and they have the capabilities to actually jam all of Israeli missiles coming in. So
that would be an absolute game changer.
It is a game changer. It's a big game changer because Russia energy minister was inside Lebanon because they found gas and oil deposits in the Mediterranean Sea inside Lebanese territory. Now, Israel is saying that territory actually belongs to them, and they're going to try to take it from Lebanon. But the energy minister and the defense minister is basically saying if there's any actions against our assets inside Lebanon, it can cause, for a conflict or a response, a military response. So we'll see what happens. This was last year. This was last summer.
Which, of course, always has that, excuse me, which is funny because Israel loves to walk around with that implied American military stick that it carries in its back pocket.
Yeah, they think that America may bail them out, but I don't know if America wants to go to war over Israel.
Yeah, you've been raising that point for a while, and I think that is an excellent point that you make on that.
It's not worth it. Let me hit this last article. This one is from PressTV.com. Explosion gunshots rock Kenyan capital. At least one explosion and gunshots rang out at the Duset upscale hotel and office complex on 14 Riverside Drive in Nairobi on Tuesday afternoon, sending workers fleeing for their lives as others cowered under the desk. Quote, a group of unknown armed assailants attacked the Doucette complex in what we suspect could be a terror attack. Kenya Police Chief Joseph Bonnet said. One person died in the hospital. Eight were injured, according to the hospital officials. Later on, 6 dead bodies were removed from the building near the hotel, according to witnesses. Police warned the attack may still be ongoing, with gunmen still inside the complex. Quote, I just started hearing gunshots and then started seeing people running away, raising their hands up, and some were entering the bank to hide for their lives. A woman working in the bank in the complex said, adding she had heard 2 explosions. We heard a loud bang from something that was thrown inside. Then I saw the shattered glass. Firefighters extinguished 3 cars ablaze by the entrance as armed security forces headed in and other armed officers evacuated shocked workers. Somali Takfiri militant group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the ongoing attack. Quote, we are behind the attack in Nairobi. The operation is going on. Said I don't even know how you pronounce his name. Gravity, help me out with that.
What's the name on there? Oh, let me see. Which one? Highlight it real quick. Abdiaziz Abu Musab.
Okay, thanks. The group's military operations spokesman. The police were already treating the incident as a potential terror attack. Quote, we have to go to the highest incident that could take place. The highest incident we have is a terror attack. Police spokesman Charles Orino told Citizen Television. So this is a well-coordinated attack by Al-Shabaab. The only thing that confuses me is that, okay, you planned out a terrorist attack in 2013 at the mall, and then in 2016 at the university campus, and now you have this. So what's to gain if you're Al-Shabaab? Like, do you think that the Kenyan government is just going to back up and like, I guess capitulate to the demands of Al-Shabaab? Like, when has that ever worked? I mean, it works for the Taliban because the Taliban has 53% support inside Afghanistan, but I don't know if a Somali terrorist group can actually force Kenyan officials to change their course.
I would say my best guesses on this is they're trying to basically harass the Kenyans to force them out of the UNISOM. Is it UNISOM? I forget the acronym for the African forces in Somalia. Do you know what the name is, Mike? But yeah, basically the African coalition forces in Somalia, Al-Shabaab, they have control over most of southern Somalia, but really not much of the country. So if they are indeed behind this, I don't know if we know for sure yet, since it's a developing story. I would say that's kind of the reason why. This kind of just makes it really more difficult for the people in Kenya. I would say because after the mall attack, there's a lot of security and military presence or police presence, I should say, at that mall. I went there last year, and they basically check you. They have dogs and metal detectors. Sometimes they make you get out of the car, just to get into a mall. So I don't think there's much to gain here. It just makes it a big hassle for everyone.
I know.
I agree. It's don't operate culturally the same as Arabs. So I agree. It's needless. It's no point. Yeah, I don't see, short of us being not privy to any information, just reading about it on the surface, I don't see any point. The attack was in 2013 at that mall. So if they were trying to do something, the attacks would be consistent. And these attacks on some purpose, 6 years apart, it doesn't make sense.
DE?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Mike. I agree with because I don't see the real value. It's not like they're carrying on a constant conflict with Kenya. They carry out one attack and then they fall back, then carry out another attack and then fall back. It's not even I don't know. The mall attack was somewhat substantial, but since then it's like what they're trying to accomplish. They're not really trying to get Kenya out of there. My from what I'm seeing though is the Kenyan economy is like one of the fastest growing on the east of Africa. I haven't been there yet, so I don't really know the details of what's going on in Kenya. But I plan on going there in a few months, so I want to see exactly what's going on for myself. But from what I've seen, I can't get the drift of what Al Shabaab is trying to accomplish unless they're working for somebody else who's just trying to keep a low level conflict brewing there for some later purpose.
Paul Bryant?
Well, Dee touched on an excellent point. So, Dee, thank you. You touched on an excellent point I was about to speak to. First of all, before I speak to the point that he made, I hate to sound like a smartass, but a terrorist uses terror for seemingly random goals. Now, to speak to what Dee said, I can absolutely see the UK through MI6 helping to fund terrorists for many different goals. Okay, we always point to the CIA, but hey, there is MI6 out there also. Okay, and we know that Africa is absolutely part of the future. So we're all aware of the Monroe Doctrine, but the UK also has their interests because they still carry out through MI6 weaken and destabilize nations. At the same time, get in on the forefront on the economic and technological side. So you're actually hedging your bets by both ways. You can weaken and destabilize a nation while simultaneously being on the forefront of emerging technologies and resource exploitation. So I do not see this or any of these terrorist actors acting alone. I just don't see it.
Yeah, somebody's feeding them, right? Somebody's putting food in their belly. They're not doing this alone. So, it just go ahead, D.
I didn't mention some earlier that some couple months ago I saw on one of I can't remember the lady's name, but she's a blogger in Kenya. She's Kenyan. And she reported that one British merchant vessel, the Kenyans wanted to search the vessel because they suspected it was loaded with weapons. And rather than have the vessel searched, the British turned around and head back out to sea.
Wow.
And they also found a number of cache of weapons, anti-aircraft missiles, anti-tank missiles in Kenya at this one British, supposedly a training base that was more than they needed for the training. So something is going on. That's
Now I know that Egypt had supported Somalia at one point. Was rumored to be supporting Somalian terrorists, and a few years ago, I want to say it might have been when Morsi was in power, and they wanted to use those terrorists to attack Ethiopia. Um, because Ethiopia was building the dam for the Nile River, and Morsi had every intention on bombing Ethiopia at the time. This is in 2013, and bombing Ethiopia would have sent the region into a hot war. Um, it would have pulled in major powers, Sudan and Libya and all these other countries surrounding it. It would have caused a big war. But there was always rumors that Morsi, the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, was going to be supporting Al Shabaab. So I don't know whatever happened to that. I haven't heard anything else about it. But you know, you're right about multiple players being involved. Paul Bryant.
Right. I haven't heard the Egypt part, but they definitely are getting funding from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, without question. Both them and the federal government as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Africa, I have taken a completely new point of view on Africa. Africa is the future in terms of investment. The future is there. The investment is there. As Mike says, the infrastructure is the investment. The opportunity is there. When I hear MPs in the British House of Commons specifically saying, quote unquote, I'm paraphrasing, we need to be in Africa. We need to be partnering and help to lead the technological development and revolution in Africa. That tells you a lot. That right there told me everything I need to know. If MPs are saying that in open House of Commons sessions, that means MI6 is in there doing what they created in the 1800s, counterintelligence. Can't tell me any different.
Let me hit this last article. This one is from New York Times. This happened today. ISIS attack in Syria kills 4 Americans, raising new worries about troop withdrawal. Washington. 4 Americans were among 19 people killed in Syria on Wednesday in a suicide bombing that was claimed by the Islamic State just weeks after President Trump ordered the withdrawal of United States forces and declared that the extremist group had been defeated. The attack targeted an American military convoy in the northern city of Manbij, while troops were inside the Palace of the Princes, a restaurant where they often stopped to eat during patrols, residents said. While the Americans were inside, a nearby suicide attacker wearing an explosive vest blew himself up. The bombing raised a few questions about Mr. Trump's surprise decision last month to end the American ground war in Syria. Critics of the president's plans, including members of his own party, said Mr. Trump's claim of victory over the Islamic State may have emboldened its fighters and encouraged Wednesday's strike. It was at least the sixth major attack by the Islamic State in less than a month, according to one United States official, and was one of the deadliest days that the American-led coalition had suffered in fight against the group. Mr. Trump's withdrawal announcement made over the objections of his top national security officials, quote, set in motion enthusiasm by the enemy we're fighting, said Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina and a prominent Trump ally who has nonetheless criticized the military drawdown. Quote, I saw this in Iraq, and I'm now seeing it in Syria, Mr. Graham said at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on Wednesday. So there's a few things here. They say ISIS claims it. If Trump says that they've defeated ISIS, you haven't really heard from ISIS. There's 4 possibilities here. Could be Turkish rebels. Could be ISIS. That's number two. Number three, it could be the. It could very well be a Kurdish decoy, as the Kurds need support from the United States, so that would draw the United States right back in. And four, it could be the deep state, such as guys like Lindsey Graham, who's so bold to talk about, oh, we're not getting out of Syria, we shouldn't get out of Syria. What do you guys think about this?
Wars make money. Based on based on your hypotheses, wars make money.
Well, you got to look at this from a standpoint of when Trump made the announcement. What did you see? What kind of reaction you see from everybody? I mean, if you found 5 people who say it's a good idea, they were not part of the establishment. They have to be the only not negative, but the only logical voices that I've heard from people who said, it's a good idea. So we haven't done anything in Syria. Those were drowned out by, I mean, the media just plastered is like covering a wall. Nobody can see what's behind it. So it had to be. I figured something would happen to make sense. See, we can't do it because this will happen, and finally it happened.
Yeah, it's very, very convenient timing. Kind of like when Bashar al-Assad was winning the war. It was a couple months back, and then he just decided to gas his own people. Of course, that made sense, right? The same thing going on here.
Well, Trump said, we're getting out, and we're getting out smart. I didn't say we were getting out tomorrow or 6 months from now, but we're getting out.
Yeah, they forced him to backpedal on that. I'm 100% sure he was ready to get out immediately.
Mm-hmm. Probably tap dance in his shoes. Shoes don't fail me now.
Yeah, but you see what Bolton did. Bolton didn't even wait for Trump to finish the statement when he was in Israel saying, hey, hold it. We're not doing that.
Yeah, and that's what pissed off Erdogan in Turkey. That how dare you come to my country after you stop in Israel before you come in here? We don't really have a deal. So from my understanding, he didn't even talk to Pompeo. He basically blew him off. Could be Turkey. Could be Turkey behind it. Turkey sending a message to the Americans: get out now while you still can. Kurds are probably saying, because the Kurds just released 1,800 ISIS prisoners out of jail, out of their Kurdish jails. So this was only Friday. So who knows? Maybe let those guys out. Those guys go out and commit a suicide attack against U.S. military personnel and justifies the Kurdish fighters getting some more support. Deep state is probably saying we're not leaving, and here's why. So that that's what
the timing was even more curious. Not so much that it's happened now, but that it happened when the vice president was giving a speech about the U.S. defeating ISIS. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Yeah. And my thing is, why are U.S. military personnel eating at some restaurant in Syria where it's a hot war zone? Like, it's not like they're in Fort Bragg or something like that, and they went down to McDonald's down a few miles down the road or something like that. These guys are in the war zone, eating falafel at some damn restaurant where ISIS is roaming around. Why don't you order some food, either through Uber Eats or some other app or something like that and sit in your damn Humvee and have your meal in there. Like, why do you have to sit in somebody's restaurant?
Well, I can tell you this as someone who worked as a government contractor and in a hot zone, and the Marines put flat jackets and Kevlar helmets on us and piled us into the APCs and then drove us to where we were working in a hot zone. Anywhere American troops are not going to be at ease if they think that they can be attacked at any second. So I don't know where that picture was taken, but if it was in country, as the military says, wherever they specifically were, they felt completely comfortable. So what I'm saying is, wherever they were, they felt zero threat of having an engagement, which only further speaks to what you just said, Mike.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have one more I definitely want to cover before we close out. Um, African American woman Marzi Hashimi has been locked up by the FBI yesterday. Let me just read this real quick. American-born Hashimi, most famous for anchoring news programs and presenting shows for Press TV, was detained upon arrival at St. Louis Lambert International Airport in St. Louis, Missouri on Sunday. Her family and friends said Press TV has learned that she was transferred by the FBI to a detention facility in Washington, D.C. The U.S. officials have so far refused to provide any reason for her apprehension, either to her or her family. The Associated Press said a call to the FBI rang unanswered early on Wednesday morning. The Bureau did not immediately respond to a written request for comment, it added. Hashimi, born Melanie Franklin, had arrived in the U.S. to visit her ill brother and other family members. Her relatives were unable to contact her, and she was allowed to contact her daughter only 2 days after her arrest. Hashimi, who had been living in Iran for years and is a Muslim convert, has told her daughter that she was handcuffed and shackled and was being treated like a criminal. The journalist also said that she had her job forcibly removed and was photographed without her headscarf upon arrival at the prison. Hashimi has only been allowed to wear a T-shirt and is currently using another one to cover her head. Furthermore, she has been offered only pork as a meal, which is forbidden under Islamic law, and even denied bread and any other halal food after refusing to consume the meat. Hashimi told her daughter that the only food that she has had over the past 2 days has been a packet of crackers. Hashimi family members and media activists have launched a social media campaign with the hashtags Free Mazari Hashimi and Pray for Mazari Hashimi in support of the detained journalists. Meanwhile, activists have launched a campaign to urge the United Nations Working Group of Arbitrary Detention to request their immediate intervention in the detained journalist case. I don't know how much you guys know about Mazari, but she's been a staunch supporter of Palestinians for a long time, and really been cussing out Israeli policies against Palestinians for a very long time. It's interesting that now they choose to go after her now. But this also comes as Mark Lamont Hill has made his comments about from the river to the sea in support of Palestinians in occupied territory of Israel. So we're starting to see people get snatched up off the streets, just for talking. We also had that woman in Texas who was a sign language teacher or something to that effect, being forced out of her job because she did not, because she supported BDS.
on a lot of our geopolitics shows, a lot of the topics on the docket, she was the YouTube videos. She was on as a journalist on Press TV. So wow.
Yeah, she's from New Orleans. She's definitely an African American woman, but she's been a very strong supporter of Palestinians and African Americans.
And she's been living in Iran for how long?
12 years.
Okay.
Oh, for probably longer than that, but I think she's as far as covering media, I think she's been there for about 12 years. She's one of the only black women out there putting in that kind of work. A lot of people don't really know her and Cynthia McKinney and a couple of other sisters. I can't remember my name right by now. Who actually stand on the front line for justice.
You know, I find it interesting based on what this article says. They followed the U.S. Army Psi Corps Division classic textbook. They removed her hijab. They refused to give her anything to cover her head. They only fed her specifically pork. That's classic PSYOPs, classic U.S. Army PSYOPs division. You know, trying to break this woman completely. Now, what are you trying to justify this? What, that she's a spy? She has been converted? I'm not saying you, Mike, specifically. You know, I'm just saying that how is the U.S. government going to justify this? I find it very interesting. Very interesting that here you have someone who has chosen not to tote the party line, not to follow what the state says in regards to her views against Israel and her views in support of Palestine, which absolutely go against the Project for the New American Century, go against the deep state. So this article for me has told me a lot, a whole lot.
Yeah. Again, they went after Mark Lamont Hill, Dr. Kevin Barrett. They stripped him of his doctor status for speaking out against Israel and speaking in support of Palestinians. Who else?
And listen again, I'm not one of these people who's always bashing Jews and blaming Jews, and you know, I'm not one of those guys. But by the very same token, if anyone wants to sit down and have a discussion of the actions that Israel takes against the Palestinians, against the Palestinians, we can absolutely have that discussion because I know a lot and Israel does a lot because I've heard this from people on the ground direct. So, with all of that said, I do find it interesting that here you have a textbook case of what this woman consistently speaks out against Israel. And here we have, she comes to U.S. soil and she's snatched up and she is subjected to classic Army PSYOPs tactics. Interesting.
And we see recently this week, Tulsi Gabbard, she's been exposed for being critical of Israel in the past. She's been around all this time, but now all of a sudden Tulsi Gabbard, she said not so nice things about Israel.
Well, listen, we for people who do pay attention, anti-Semitic is not a thing. Anti-Semitic really means you said something that Jewish people or Israeli people don't like. So they're going to call you anti-Semitic. Okay? Now, if there are people who disagree with that, we can absolutely have a discussion on that later. But, Israel and Jewish Israeli people, let me be as specific as possible. When Israel dislikes you or makes or tries to character assassinate you, it's usually because you are exposing what Israel is doing.
Mm-hmm. DE, you were going to say something, or anti-gravity? Which one of you guys are going to say something?
Yeah, it was. This week has been interesting. You had the women from the Women's March. They're getting a whole lot of shit now, even from people on their left, in regards to Tamika Mallory and the other lady there that wears the hijab. I forgot her name. And the Bobby Brown lady about their, associations with Farrakhan and, with folks that have quote unquote anti-Semitic views, and their refusal to disavow them or condemn some of their, some of the things that some of those individuals have said in the past, to where now recently, like a lot of the presidential candidates that were at the 2017 Women's March, like that black chick from California, forgot her name, Cory Booker, the one New York senator that took over after Hillary, the one with the creepy eyes, or that's the Gabbard lady? It might be her. But they're all kind of like, wish we could attend, but we're not going to come to the Women's March this year because all the leaders are now being pegged as being, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. So there's, just like mass disassociation with anybody who's being, labeled, with that as well. And I think there's going to be like a lot more of that coming out because you got a lot of local people. You got a lot of homebred people that, based on, some of the things they've learned, that they were taught or whatever, that, that they're going to get, that they got radicalized. It happened in the 60s, it happened in the 70s. It's going to happen. People are going to take up ideologies and belief systems and, believe certain things. And sometimes their associations with people, that are on watch lists, either in this country or outside of this country, are going to put them in the hot seat. Just today, we had a black kid, actually, 21 years old, out of all places, Forsyth County, Georgia. The irony of that. That the FBI swooped down on, snatched him up because he was supposedly planning on a terrorist attack on the White House, a brother, and it's like I said earlier, there's going to be two extremes. It's not going to be a political party thing. It's going to be two extremes. There's going to be folks that are going to, be far, far, far left, and folks that are going to be far, far, far right. It's just gonna get, it might get crazy here for a minute. And some unfortunate people, maybe like this young lady right here, are gonna be caught in the middle because they sympathize with people that are on certain lists. So they get snatched up and they get try to be broken to see what they know, who they know, how long they know them, or what can they snitch on.
I don't think this lady is young. I think she's like 60 years old, but Maserati is.
I call all ladies young ladies. It makes them smile.
Okay, I don't think she's smiling right now, but anti-gravity, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, actually, this is the first time I heard about this story. It's very unfortunate. I haven't heard of her before, but I'll have to look into her.
Yeah, she's well known in the community. She's well known in the justice community. She's as a journalist, she's always stood on the side of for hot peace, so for truth. So
right. Yeah, I find it kind of curious. Everyone, if you turn on the news for the past like 2 years, everyone's hyperventilating about Russia's interference in the election, but Israel is clearly influencing, American politicians and government and foreign policy, domestic and foreign policy. So, in the long run, really, what the Israelis' foreign policy is going to alienate everyone, and that includes the U.S. eventually, at some point. There's going to be another war that Israel wants the U.S. to go into, and the American people won't allow it, and that'll be the end of Israel.
Well, look at how they treat black people down in Houston when the Houston flood had happened. They were making black people sign these agreements that they won't support BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel. This is the level of violation of your constitutional rights that they're willing to go. I mean,
it's a desperation. They're desperate.
On top of on top of the fact that they're trying to squeeze their way as an observer member of the African Union. I just find that to be very, very interesting, the timing.
It's funny you mentioned, Mike, about the BDS because here in New York City, there was a very loud, very vocal, and rising voice for BDS. People were calling for the government of New York City to adopt BDS and to make that official New York City policy until our lovely mayor decided that he was going to go his own way, and he said any company that wants to do business directly with the city of New York, that wants to bid on any New York City contract in any aspect of business, if they take a policy where they support BDS, they will not be doing business with the city of New York. And the city of New York, in official policy, will in no way support BDS and condemns BDS. I find that to be very interesting for a place that has been called New York City since the 1930s. But I say all that, just as a point of interest, because I personally, just my opinion, I personally have never held the belief that Israel controls U.S. policy. Again, only my opinion. Some influence and some sway, yes, but to out and out say that Israel dictates U.S. policy, I don't see that. I see American interest there from financial standpoints. I see that happening, but again, time will tell. I'm not saying anyone is right or wrong. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. Time will tell.
Yeah, these are flagrant abuses of First Amendment. Completely unconstitutional.
Yeah, but you know what? People who write laws, they don't care about that, because people who write laws, they feel laws don't apply to them because they write them, and they always add in loopholes anyway. So, I mean, I agree with what you said as far as flagrant violation of human rights. I agree with you totally. But the people,
no, the First Amendment. First Amendment.
Yes, that as well. But again, these people, when I say these people, the wealthy elite and the deep staters, they don't care about that. They are absolutely cold, callous, black-hearted people. They don't care about that at all, because they feel that they will never be held accountable.
Right, and there's 26 states in the United States that actually within the union that forbid BDS, that have laws against BDS against Israel. So we see this happening right now. Most of your red states are actually the perpetuators of this right now. They're siding with Israel. We saw back when Obama was in office how the Republicans, brought Netanyahu in and were basically sitting out having festivities with Netanyahu over Obama when he was in office. So we see there's a sudden shift, and plus you also saw Netanyahu with Bolsonaro at his election last week. It's just the timing. There's a strong timing here of who's getting silenced and who's not. Right? You had during Charlottesville, where you had the Proud Boys and David Duke and these guys, with tiki torches saying, Jews will not replace us. But then there's no ADL, there's no outrage from Tel Aviv, nothing. But if you say anything in support of Palestinians, all of a sudden now your channel was flagged, you're downvoted, you can't get it on social media in some areas, such as Facebook and Twitter. You see what happened with Mark Lamont Hill. You've been ousted from your CNN job. This lady, you get arrested.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. That's the desperation, though, Mike. Because the BDS movement really is putting financial strain on Israel. Right. It hasn't really taken off that much here in the U.S. You know, the ball is starting to roll. But in Europe, Africa, some of the Asian countries, definitely a lot of Muslim countries, it's starting to take a huge financial toll. I believe Paul, what was the largest bank in France? It's not PNC. It's
Oh,
do you know
I
the
want.
name?
Yeah, the name escapes me at the moment. I know who you're referring to though.
Yeah, they signed on to the BDS movement where they're no longer accepting funds from Israeli
HS,
companies.
HSBC.
You talking about Society Generale?
No, no. I think it starts with a P. PNB, I think.
No,
No,
PNB is
HSBC is England. No, it's not them.
it has Society Generale is French. The French bank, big bank.
What's their initial?
Yeah, the name
Shoot.
escapes me at the moment, but I will say this: if BDS, and let me be clear right now, personally, I am a huge supporter of BDS because I would absolutely love to see Israel's power and influence uh, all around the world crumble. I would love to see that crumble because a lot of people are unaware that in 1947 it was the U.S. military that backed European Jewish people to go into the sovereign state of Palestine and murder men, women, and children in their beds to create this state presently called Israel. Those aren't opinions, those are facts. So,
I, I, I would have thought it was the British that actually supplied the weapons and ammunition for him
uh,
in training.
yeah, well, see, here's the thing, right? There's the official story, and then if you dig deeper and do the research, you will find that there was U.S. military in involvement. So I am a firm supporter of BDS because what Israel does, there's a lot of things that they do that are wrong. We haven't covered them here, and I don't want to take a whole lot of time right now to specifically cover them. We can absolutely cover them later, but if BDS works, I would like to see that work because I have absolutely zero love and appreciation for Israel and the things that they do. Sounds like Preem is about to sing tonight.
Go ahead.
Nah.
Any other articles, Mike? Or is that it for today? Or is it open mic, I should say?
For today.
Okay, if it's open mic, I just want to bring up one thing real quickly. I don't know if you guys are following what's happening in the UK with the Brexit votes. You guys hear about that?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
follow that daily.
It's one giant cluster.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes for open mic. We can go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll just go over, I guess, the broad strokes real quickly. Yesterday, no, the day before that, they had a vote on the Brexit deal that Theresa May was able to negotiate with the EU, and she got a very stunning defeat, almost double the margin for a no. So then they called for a no confidence vote, basically to oust her the day after, and she narrowly escaped that. So they're back to basically square one. And really, I see this as the EU, basically the EU putting the UK in its place. right? Humbling them. They still have fantasies about being about the empire they used to be, but really, without the EU, they're kind of shit out of luck. But what do you guys think?
Well, yeah, Theresa May. Here's the thing, right? We've known, when I say we, any person who's been following Brexit closely, we've known for a while now that the deal that the that Theresa May and her cabinet negotiated would not pass the vote in the House of Commons. We also knew that Jeremy Corbyn would then call for a vote of no confidence. We also knew that Theresa May very likely would pass the vote of no confidence, which she did. So the end effect is we're right back where we started. March 29th is coming. There is no deal. And the EU said that they are unwilling to negotiate any new deals until August. So what does that mean? There's going to be a hard exit. Okay, at the end of the day, there's going to be a hard exit, and businesses all across the country are complaining how it's going to have a devastating effect on the economy. The most immediately hardest hit will be British citizens living and working in continental Europe, because for us Americans, if let's say I want to go work in Canada or I want to go work in Brazil or Venezuela, I have to first arrange my job there. I have to have that company sponsor me for a work visa there. All this has to be in place. Then I can travel there. I can pick up my work visa and I can work there because I'm a U.S. citizen traveling on my passport and my work visa. Under the current EU system, a British national can use his passport and he can travel to Germany, France, Turkey, Greece, wherever, look for work, find that work, and then begin working because even though he may be a British national, he is a EU citizen. So on March 30th, which is going to be the day after, 31st, whichever is the first business day after England leaves the EU via Brexit, as it now stands, you now basically become illegal to work in that country because you don't have a work visa because you're no longer an EU citizen after Brexit. You're solely a British uh, citizen. So thousands, tens of thousands of British nationals working all across Europe are literally going to have to get on planes and leave the country. And heads of state of many nations are threatening that they will enforce this new status, that they will be technically illegal aliens working illegally. So when people say Brexit is a mess, there are so many implications to Brexit at every possible level. And Jeremy Corbyn is talking out of his ass. Theresa May is stonewalling. How this turns out between now and March 29th is anyone's guess.
Right, the EU has to make an example out of the UK, right? So that they don't have anyone else in the union, trying to get out. Because if they
Yeah,
give favorable terms to the UK, then suddenly Greece, Italy, a lot of other countries Spain, they're gonna want to jockey for a better deal than what they currently have in the EU right now, or else they'll threaten to leave.
Well, this is Germania. This is what Hitler wanted. This is what Hitler talked about. This is Germania. The EU has every nation in Europe basically as a as an economic colony. You know, they don't hold public votes. They don't have public referendums. They decide what they're going to do, and then they tell you what they're going to do and how it is, and you have nothing to do but say yes, sir. Can I have another? And that's something that Mike has consistently spoken about. It's it's tantamount to economic slavery.
Yeah, if the UK can't get out, because the thing is about the UK is that yeah, Britain wants to get out, but then you have Scotland saying, oh well, we kind of like the EU. Of course you do.
That's another thing. SNP is saying that they don't I'm sorry, they don't want to go. I was going to say they don't necessarily know that they don't want to go. So the public referendum vote that was taken back in 2016, Scotland, they don't want to leave. And then you have Ireland. Ireland is saying they don't want to leave if it's going to hurt Ireland. If it's going to benefit, they'll go. They'll back it, but they don't see how it's going to help them at all. And at the end of the day, the SNP and Ireland, they have a voice in Parliament. They have seats in the House of Commons, but at the end of the day, the lion's share of members are from England and Wales, and Wales does whatever England does. So they really don't have much of a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an absolute mess.
What about the idea that since British is like the fine, I don't know, Germany is the manufacturing arm, the British the financier, and if the British try to get out of Europe, what's going to happen to their financial power
Well,
in the European area?
Germany is the economic powerhouse of all of Europe. Even England does not have the financial power that Germany has. They have a lot. They have a lot, but in terms of economic power, it is America, China, and Germany, not the UK, not even close.
Oh, I thought he meant kind of are they gonna the financial service sector is gonna move from London to Frankfurt? Was that your question, D?
Either from to Frankfurt or Paris, which I don't know which one would they choose, but that's what it looks like.
Well, if the economic sector moves from England to Frankfurt, then again that plays into Angela Merkel's hands. That only helps Germany, and Germany already is the economic engine of Europe. So that's a win. That's an absolute win for Germany. That once again hurts England and benefits the EU. So you have to remember, whenever we say the quote unquote the EU, we're really talking Germany. This is Germania. This is what Hitler wanted. Germany controlling Europe.
There have been a question raised that I see people in England raised about since this vote failed, that they can vote again to stop the Brexit and kind of cancel the exit from the EU.
Yes and no. What would have to happen is another public referendum would have to be held. Theresa May has said she does not see the need right now for another public referendum vote because most people in England still want Brexit. They had a national referendum vote. It wasn't a large margin of victory. It was only 52 to 48%, but it was a majority. So more people wanted to leave than to stay, and the public consensus right now in England is the British people want Brexit, but they want a deal, and they want a deal that benefits England. So come March, and since that referendum vote was held, the government moved to initiate Brexit. So come March 29th, England is gone anyway. So unless Theresa May can find national support to hold a referendum vote, to reverse that and change that, come March 30th, England will no longer be part of the EU.
They're supposed to pay what, 80 billion pounds to get out?
In a one-time upfront payment at that.
So, is there a bilateral U.S.-UK trade agreement currently, or is all of that routed through the EU and a new one has to be negotiated?
That is a good question. I honestly cannot give you an exact answer on that because, to my knowledge, there are any trade deals between the U.S. and the U.K. are presently direct with the U.S. and the U.K. and they're on a per on a, for lack of a better term, per deal basis or on a per circumstance basis. Like, is it for the importation of cars or fruits and vegetables, consumer staples? So I don't know of any exact like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Okay, to my knowledge, the U.S. and the U.K. don't have anything like that. It's more a case of we're the U.S., you're the U.K., we just do business. But I will definitely research that. But to my knowledge, that does not presently exist.
Okay, because I think, come March 29th, they won't have a deal. They'll get kicked out. It'll be chaos for them. And then I'm trying to see what would be the U.S. advantage for this one. Like, U.S. businessmen, do they come in, start buying things up, negotiating new bilateral agreements? I'm trying to see what happens after the 29th, but it seems to be a question mark.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that they've reestablished trade relations with their Commonwealth states of Britain. So just about the majority of Africa and Caribbean states they've reestablished these economic trade agreements. So it sounds to me like they're trying to create their own little back door or hail down another cab and get going while the going is good, while the getting is good. Because they know they can't afford to pay it's not that they can't afford; they just don't want to. Have no interest in paying 80 billion pounds to the European Union to get out. Like that's and if they can't afford to pay, there may be some kind of economic tariffs and sanctions put in place on United Kingdom.
And that's the thing. The UK absolutely has the $80 billion to spend. They have it. It's not a poor, broke country. But why are you going to spend $80 billion and you're basically just going to piss the money away? The biggest thing where it's going to affect England is exactly what you said, trade. The UK needs Europe more so than the US. Because Europe is right there. So now all of the trade that has zero tariffs and zero economic hit overnight, now you're going to get tariffs. Now you're going to be paying more money. Now it's going to affect every business in the UK that trades and does business with Europe, which is now going to be the EU separate from the UK. And all those nations are going to do exactly what anti-gravity said, or maybe it was DE who said, forgive me, I don't even remember which one of you, but they said they're going to stick it to the UK, absolutely stick it to them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll be back on Friday with economics, and then Saturday as well for another hangout on Black Tech Talk with agricultural tech and cannabis. Have a good night.